Prologue. I pulled my shirt over my head as I got ready for the pack meeting later. Lauren, we need to speak to you now. I heard my mother call from the stairs. Her words made me flinch. Something bad was going to happen, and I knew it. I opened the door and peeked out into the hallway. I could hear my sister's music playing on her radio from the room down the hall. I bit my lip and headed towards the stairs. I saw my mother waiting there, tapping her foot. "You know how I hate to be left waiting," she told me, and I nodded. "Sorry, Mama." She shook her head and held up her hand to me. "I don't want your excuses." But She gave me a hard look which told me to be quiet. I kept my lips tight together. Her hard stare gave everything away. My father was coming out of the kitchen with a disappointed look on his face. He glanced over me and shook his head. "Lauren, why are you here?" he asked me, and I frowned. "I live here." "No. You know what I mean. Everyone else your age is living with their mates, and you're still living at home. It's almost an embarrassment." "I don't need a mate, though." My mother scoffed. "Don't be stupid, dear. Everyone needs a mate, whether you like them or not." "But Mama." "No buts, Lauren." I glanced behind her. 2 large bags were on the floor by the front door. I stared at them and then looked back up at my mother. "Mama, you haven't been out of the house once this month. Your stupid fears can't hurt you. I don't know if it was my fault that you're so scared of everything, but for some reason, your sister isn't afraid of anything." I stared at my mother. My fingers twitched in fear of her striking me. She has never hit me before. She hasn't needed to. "Do you really think my mate could actually help me?" I whimpered. "No one else has been able to help me, and you think that he could?" I cried out. My mother placed her hands on her hips and stared at me. "Your father helped me, didn't he?" My bottom lip trembled. Her hard glare was focused on me. I heard a car pull up outside the house. My father grabbed both of my bags, and my mother grabbed my wrist. "You will not return home until you've found your mate. I don't care how long it takes. I want you to get over your stupid fears and be a normal werewolf." I whimpered at her grip. It was too hard on my wrist. She forced the car door open and shoved me into the seat. I glanced at the man next to me, who was staring at his steering wheel. "Mama," I whispered, and she shook her head at me. "I promise that your mate will help you." "I don't need help," I cried out. She sighed and shook her head. She shut the door, closing me in the car. I squeezed my eyes shut. I hated cars, or anything that moved for that matter. Chapter 1. I stared out onto the road as trees started to reappear around us. "Lauren." The soft voice came from beside me. The voice made me look over at the man. He glanced at me before looking at the road. "I know you're going to hate me for this, but you have to learn." The car pulled over to the side of the road, and he turned to look at me. I opened my mouth to reply, but he was already unbuckling my seatbelt and opening the car door. "Goodbye." He shoved me out of the car and onto the dirt next to the road. I landed on the ground hard, making me swallow back the tears of being left there. I watched the tail end of the car speed away back towards my home. I was alone. Alone, a word I hated and feared. A word that I wished to never experience had come back to haunt me. I let out a small cry as I felt a jolt of pain go through my wrist when I went to move it. The pain that shot up my arm was almost unbearable. I stood up and pushed my hair away from my eyes with my uninjured hand as I looked up and down the road. I was in another pack's territory without permission, and that meant danger was everywhere. I bit down on my lip and inspected my surroundings. All I could see was an endless forest. A growl came from the opposite side of the road. My eyes instantly attached themselves to a dark brown pair. A flash of teeth being bared at me told me everything I needed to know. My eyes widened in fear, and I took a step back onto the dry land there. The mud crumbled under my feet, causing me to go with it. I let out a scream as I started to fall into the deep ditch. I knew I had probably made myself known to the entire pack by now. My head hit a large rock, and I could feel a stinging pain start to appear. I clenched my eyes shut and stuck my leg out to try to slow myself down. I let out a cry as I felt it collide hard with a tree. I felt my body finally come in contact with flat ground. I let out a sigh of relief, knowing I was probably at the bottom of the ditch. I felt the wet mud beneath my back, and I gritted my teeth together from the pain. I heard a howl coming from somewhere nearby, but all I could hear was a ringing sound. It was almost like the sound you get when you fall over and land on something hard. I tried to keep my breathing even, but it was hard when I could hear the faint footsteps of something coming towards me. My vision started to be consumed by darkness. I let out a sigh and saw the dark brown eyes I was running from before I let the darkness consume me. My first instinct when I woke up was to clutch my head. A pounding headache was moving its way from the back of my head to the front, and it was painful. It almost felt like I had a hangover. I've only ever gotten a hangover once, and after that, I never drank again. I opened my eyes slowly to stare at a cream-colored ceiling. My ceiling wasn't cream. It was a faded white. I let my eyes travel around the room. There were 2 sets of doors. One, I was pretty sure, led to a bathroom, and the double doors most likely led to a hallway of some sort. Just as I predicted, the doors were thrown open, and a young woman walked in. She must be about 23 at most. She smiled at me and looked at the young child behind her. "Hello, dear. My name is Christina, and this is Jasmine." I watched the younger girl cower behind the older one. "Will you be staying with us?" she asked, and I snapped my eyes up to her. I frowned, confused by her question. I watched her sigh and cross her arms in front of her chest. "You're not much of a talker, are you?" She took a step towards me, and my reflexes kicked in. I shuffled back towards the headboard. She tilted her head to the side. "I'm here to help you, not harm you. I've been given orders to come here and help you change." I opened my mouth to speak. Everything inside of me wanted to tell her to go away. I wanted to go home. I wasn't going to find my mate locked up in a room like this. Why was I thinking like that? My mate was probably some bodybuilder. I shivered at the thought of a large man. I bit my lip as I watched the small girl place the clothes down on the bed. I'll have to remember her. She seemed to know what to do in a situation like this. She looked up at me. Her small blue eyes reminded me of the ones on my younger sister. They must be the same age anyway. "Christina. I can hear your father calling. We need to go," the small girl named Jasmine whispered. "She's scared, and we won't be able to even get close to her." She knew I could hear every word. She glanced at me before dragging the taller girl out of the room and shutting the doors quietly. I silently thanked her. I grabbed the clothes at the end of the bed and inspected them. It was a dress that seemed to reach the floor. I studied it and set my lips in a straight line. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and flinched when my left leg started to ache. I walked over to the window and searched the ground for any other people. There were about 24 people down there. I saw a man lift a child off the floor and place him on his shoulders. Didn't the man realize the risks and hear the child squealing? This pack was so different from mine. Most of the men weren't as big as ours, but I could tell they still liked to be in their wolf forms. I saw Jasmine suddenly run into the mix and hug an elderly woman who was sitting in a chair. She was probably a grandma. I stared at the couple as the old woman spoke as if she were talking to them about how the world was made. I glanced down at my feet and let my fingers feel my hair. My hair felt disgusting, as if someone had come and poured mud all over it. It felt dry and... oh right. I bit my lip to stop myself from laughing at my stupidity. I headed over to the bathroom and turned on the shower. I stepped in and let the water cascade down my back and through my hair. I let out a breath in relief. Being in the shower always gave me some kind of release, like I could get away from the world and all of my fears. I heard my wolf howl in agreement with me. Once I had finished, I stepped out and wrapped a towel around my body. I ran another hand through my hair, checking it was back to its normal state. I looked at it in the mirror above the sink. It was back to its normal dark brown color. The girl who stared back at me looked like nothing I felt. She had the perfect shaped face with light blue eyes rimmed with a black circle. She looked confident and was ready to take on the world, while on the inside, she wasn't ready to even get out of the bathroom. I shook my head and walked back into the bedroom. I pulled on the clothes that were laid out on the bed for me. I bit my lip and quickly dried my hair with the towel before running my hands through it. There was a knock on the door, and then it was opened by an older lady. She ran her eyes over my body and smiled at me. "You're a very beautiful girl," she told me. "You're like my daughter." I tilted my head to the side, unsure what to say. "Thank you," I whispered. I was surprised that she actually heard. She smiled at me. "You're welcome, dear. My daughter used to be just like you until her mate came along and changed her for the better." "May I?" she asked, holding out her hand. I silently placed my hand in hers. She smiled up at me. "Since you're awake and can actually walk, I'll have to take you to the beta of the pack." "The beta?" I knew she saw my confusion and laughed. "My son isn't here at the moment. His right-hand man will have to do for now. My son is away sorting out a rogue problem with a smaller pack." "Is her son the alpha?" "Oh, that would make sense." She looked like the type that would take charge. I took my time to study the older woman. Her dark hair was tied at the back of her head in a neat bun, and her sweet smile told me that I could trust her, for now. Chapter 2. The two large doors stood in my way between the beta of this pack and me. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. The old lady turned to me. "If you need me, just call for Georgina." She knocked on the door and then patted my hand lightly. The door was opened by a large man who looked a couple of years older than me. His glare was hard and demanding. His eyes swept over me once before looking at Georgina. "Who is this?" he snapped. The woman next to me sighed and shook her head. "Did your mother teach you no manners?" she asked back, and his glare softened. "Come in," he muttered, opening the door wider for us both to step in. "It's nice to meet you." He waited for me to say my name, but I could feel my legs begin to shake, barely able to hold myself up. I was terrified of large men like him. It reminded me of when I was 6 and went to a pack meeting with my mother. I remembered what seemed like a small space we had all been squished into. I remembered staring up at the tall men as they laughed when they shoved me hard enough so I would fall on my butt, while my mother stood there doing nothing but looking at me and shaking her head in disappointment. I felt a shiver go down my spine as I recalled the memory. His stare became impatient, and he crossed his arms over his chest. "Don't keep me here waiting. I could be with my mate right now," he barked out at me, making me tug a little at Georgina. She tried to calm me down with a soothing rub on my arm. "Kent," she scolded. "Can you see she's terrified?" "She should be. Rogues are not welcome in this pack house." "She's not a rogue," she argued back. Kent snorted and went behind the desk. "If she's not a rogue, then what is she doing on our land without our permission?" Georgina narrowed her eyes at him. The room started to feel as if it was getting smaller as both of their eyes landed on me. I glanced around the room. There was a window and a door. Neither would be easy to escape from. I felt my body start to shake again. "Why are you here, dear?" Georgina asked, and I looked at her. My gaze went from her to the beta and then back to her. "Are you trying to find someone? A friend? A parent? Your mate?" I nodded my head at the last one, and she smiled. It's nice to see a young lady cross our land in search of her mate. See, Kent, she's not here to kill us all. She's here to find her mate." "Well, there is only one male who is unmated, and he's not here." "Not true. We are not counting the boys under the age of 16. They are yet to go through the ceremony." Georgina's eyes narrowed. "I'm not letting her leave with her still afraid of us. She'll probably go home and never find her mate." My bottom lip trembled at the memory of my parents basically disowning me until I found my mate. Georgina turned to me. "First, we must know your name, dear, and then you will have a private discussion with Kent here. He'll be nice, won't you, Kent?" She hissed the last bit at Kent with a glare. He nodded slowly before Georgina grinned. "Great. So what's your name?" "Lauren," I stuttered, and she patted my shoulder. "Lovely name. Here, take a seat." She sat me opposite the beta, who was studying me closely with his hands clasped together on the large desk. "I'll see you soon," Georgina said as I watched her open the large doors and then shut them quietly. I stared longingly after her. "Let's start this conversation." There was a pause before a cough, and I whipped my head around to face him. "As my alpha isn't here at the moment." "Why?" I asked, suddenly interested. His eyes narrowed at me. "Personal reasons," he told me. "Why so suddenly interested?" he asked, and I clamped my lips shut. I hated being one of those people who had to ask a question. It didn't fit my other side at all. He grunted before shuffling through files and placing them neatly in one pile. As I was saying, the Alpha isn't here at the moment, which means that you cannot leave this Alpha house without being classified as a rogue. I nodded lightly. I knew the rules. I had basically read all the history of my own pack to save me from going outside and getting attacked by something. Therefore, we must keep you in this house, and for that reason, we can't possibly let you laze around the pack house like you actually live here. So instead, you'll be one of the workers who work in the pack house. You'll do what your leader says, and if not, then I'll have to kill you. He said it so casually that it actually scared me. He stared at me for a few more seconds before shaking his head. Paula is the head maid here. If she says you stepped out of line in any way, then... He didn't need to say it. I nodded my head in understanding, and he nodded his. Good. Georgina will show you where everything is. His eyes were back set on the sheets in front of him. A soft hand came down on my shoulder, making me jump and nearly fall off my chair. Sorry, dear, Georgina's voice said from behind me. I'll show you where you'll be staying from now on. I nodded and stood up slowly before following her. She glanced back at me a couple of times before smiling. Here, we like to treat everyone with the respect they deserve. What about your pack? She asked me. I kept my lips sealed shut. To be honest, I didn't know. Since I never went outside, I had no idea what pack life was really about. She stared at me, waiting for an answer, before shaking her head and leading me into a large kitchen. Sasha, Georgina asked, tapping on a nearby girl. The small girl turned around to face us. Her face was smudged with flour and whatever else she'd been using. Where's Paula? Sasha pointed over to a corner where a lady was glaring down at a small girl who only looked 12. Georgina shook her head at the scene she was seeing and marched over there. It was actually cool to see Georgina take her place as alpha female and march over to the couple. Her face seemed cold and hard as she hissed some words at the taller woman. What I presumed was that the woman named Paula had black hair with white starting to come out from old age. I could easily guess she was in her 50s and was a very hard leader. The word leader made me look around the room at the many women who were working here. There were too many. I felt my body clamp up and I became as stiff as a board. I looked around for the exits they had here. Just one. The one behind me, which had just been closed, and two men stood beside it. I whimpered out lightly, and someone grabbed my wrist. I squealed as an old woman looked up at me. Better not show your fear here, dear. This is the place where you must show your strength. I stared at her, confused by her words. How would she know that I was that scared? The old woman cocked her head and let go of her deathly grip on my wrist before hunching over and shuffling away. Lauren, Georgina said, smiling at me. This is Paula. Paula, this is Lauren. Paula looked me over, almost as if she was inspecting me, and disgust grew on her face. What do you expect her to do here? Clean. She grabbed my hands and inspected them before throwing them away in disgust. She hasn't worked a day in her life. I brought my hand up to my chest and let my other hand stroke my wrist, trying to get the feeling of her hands off. It doesn't matter. She's a good learner. You've known her for 5 minutes, she hissed. Don't you dare speak to me like that. I am your elder and alpha female at the moment. Paula crossed her arms over her chest and stared at her. Until your son's mate decides to show up, and I'm sure she'll be my best friend. She grinned. Her teeth were yellow and stained. It sent a shiver up my spine. She reminded me of Sydney back in my pack. The person who hated the alphas and wanted them both dead. I shook my head mentally, trying to shake the memory of everyone there. Until then, you will take care of her, and you will do everything I say. Paula narrowed her eyes, but nodded. As soon as Georgina left, I felt alone. I felt unsafe, and I felt my hands start to shake at my sides. Paula turned to me and scoffed before turning away. Sophia, she called into the crowd. A young girl came bounding over. Yes, mother, she asked before studying me. Take this, girl, to your room. She will be staying with you tonight until the alpha comes back. But mother, I don't care what you have to say. Go. Sophia sighed and moved a stray hair behind her ear. She looked at me once before heading towards the door. I followed quickly, happy to get out of that room. Sophia slowed down so I could catch up to her when she realized she had put a great distance between us. Once she was side by side, she spoke. I can smell your fear. I didn't reply. That's good. I gave her a curious look out of the side of my eye. If you fear my mother, it means you won't get in her way. She'll like you for that. She grabbed a key out of the small pocket in her skirt and opened the small wooden door in front of us. I glanced around the room. It was different from anything I had ever stayed in. There were 2 beds in the room. Sophia had obviously decided that no one else was going to use the other bed and piled it up with books and other pieces of clutter. Sophia smiled sheepishly at me. Sorry. I didn't know that I was going to share my room with anyone. Hang on. I watched her grab items off the bed and scatter them around the room. It was much smaller than I imagined. It was much smaller than my room and a shoebox compared to the room I first used when I woke up this morning. Well, here. She glanced down at the neatly made bed and then back to me. I stared at it before looking back at her. I know it's probably much smaller than any room you've lived in, but I've been living here since I was 6, she said, like she was proud. I could see right through her, though. I knew that she wanted to live upstairs with the alphas and higher-ranking people in the pack. I heard her let out a small sigh and place another strand of black hair behind her ear. What about your mate? I asked her. She looked over at me, a little stunned at first, but she slowly got used to my curious gaze. I haven't found my mate yet. My father, well, he was killed a few years ago. I bit my lip. I'm sorry. She shook her head and sat down on her bed. It's fine. My dad was only a gardener anyway. He wasn't important. I sat down across from her. He's important to you, though. Sophia shook her head before opening her mouth. A loud bell rang, and Sophia closed her mouth. It's dinner time. Come on. If we get there fast, we can actually have some of the good stuff. She grinned at me before grabbing my wrist, not realizing how terrified I actually was of anyone. Chapter 3. Every day here seemed to be agony. As soon as I entered the kitchen, I was shoved or pushed somewhere. I hardly did any of the work since every time I heard someone approach, I would instantly tense up and freeze. Sophia ended up doing most of my work, making me feel bad in the process. I flinched as I looked up at the tall window. I soon worked out that everyone works in pairs, and it seems to work well here. Sophia was climbing on the ledge and jumping up and down, trying to reach the hard-to-reach places, when she squinted to look out the window at something. Hey, Lauren. She looked down at me. Can you pass me the dash? Then she squealed as she lost her footing on the ledge and started to fall backwards. I was too shocked to do anything as I was waiting for the loud crunch of breaking bones. There was nothing. I stared at where she would have landed. A young man stood there grinning at Sophia. Hello there, he purred. I hadn't seen him around here. I'm Caleb, and your name is Mate? Mate? I tilted my head and studied the couple. Sophia sat in his arms bridal style, and she reached up for his black hair and then kissed his nose lightly. Sophia. He tested the name on his tongue once before setting her down on her feet. I had never seen 2 people meet and instantly become mates. Even though I wanted to, I never had the guts to leave the house. I shifted from one foot to the other uncomfortably as the young man, Caleb, rocked his mate back and forth lovingly as they stared at each other. It made me wonder if I would ever find my mate. Would he be nice? Or would he be a possessive jerk like most are? Is he an Omega or a high-ranking warrior? I shook my head, clearing my thoughts before I cleared my throat. Sophia giggled before he set her on the floor. Caleb turned to me and narrowed his eyes. Of course, he had no reason to trust me. I probably looked like a rogue to him who came to kill his mate. His intense gaze made me more uncomfortable by the minute. I looked at Sophia, pleading with her to make him stop. She nudged his arm, and he looked back at her. Caleb, this is my friend Lauren. She's new to the pack. Caleb turned to me and tilted his head. New? How? I opened my mouth to reply, but nothing came out. I closed it again and looked at the ground. Are you mute? Speak, he barked. I cringed away from him and his angry tone. Don't shout at her, Sophia shouted at him. She's my friend, and you will treat her as such. I saw her turn and walk away. Sophia, love, I'm sorry. She looks like a rogue. Come on, talk to me, he pleaded after her. I stood there on my own for a second before grabbing the stuff from the floor and walking back towards the maid's quarters, moving quickly to try and avoid as many people as I could. I dumped the supplies in the cupboard before turning around and coming face to face with the beta. His eyes narrowed down on mine. You, he said, pointing at me, making me back up further away from him. What the hell do you think you're doing? He growled out. I whimpered and turned my head to the side, trying to avoid eye contact. Don't look away from me. He grabbed my chin and forced me to look back at him. Now tell me what the hell you were doing? I flinched away from him. I couldn't think of anything to say. What was there to say? I was doing my job. He growled at me again as he heard footsteps coming towards us. I glanced over when they stopped, and I saw a young man standing there, sighing. He had a book in his hands and shook his head at his beta. Kent, stop trying to intimidate the girl. She gets it, you're the beta. A hand latched onto his arm and gave him a slight tug, and the grip on my chin was gone. I sucked in a shaky breath before pressing myself up to the wall again. The man looked up at me. Hi, I'm Joshua. I see you've met my idiot of a brother. He grinned at me. I stood there, confused by the whole thing. I'm also the Delta of the pack. I frowned. Deltas are hardly ever used since an Alpha hardly needed both a right and left-hand man. It was rare to have one, but packs still do. He rolled his eyes. Yeah, I know. Why do you have a Delta? Well, we always have and always will. He grinned at me. Anyway, what's your name, sweetheart? He spoke to me as if I were a small child. I was tempted to glare at him, but I kept my face neutral and confused. His brother snorted and crossed his arms. She doesn't speak. She's like mute or something. Doesn't speak? Then how do you know her name? Because she told Georgina, and don't speak down to your beta. He barked out as I watched the match between the two brothers. Well, Georgina is an easy person to trust. Why do you think she works with the younger kids? Because she has no need anywhere else. She's a woman. I heard a gasp and turned to a woman. I still stood there, confused about what to do. I watched the beta slowly turn around to the woman. Bunny, I didn't mean it like that. Damn well you didn't. I don't want you in our bed tonight. No, I don't want you in our room tonight, you selfish pig. I heard him whimper, and I slowly took a sidestep and started jogging away from the scene. Oh, come on, Bunny. It's just the baby hormones speaking. You want me dash. I shook my head to cut them off before making a turn into the kitchen. I instantly stopped to see a practically empty kitchen. I tilted my head and frowned. Two girls passed, giggling. I can't believe he's coming back tonight. Do you think he hasn't found his mate? I overheard the light blonde one giggle. June, if he found his mate, he would have informed us. Just help me get all the rooms ready. I heard their voices trail off as I made my way deeper into the kitchen. Have you already guessed? A croaky voice said. It made me jump right into the corner of the wooden table, and I winced as I covered it with my hand. I looked down at the old lady who had her hair braided back and was carrying a plate of cookies onto the table. Our mates here seem to fight for something. Even if it's fighting over what they're going to call their first baby or what they are going to do later in the evening. She chuckled and wiped her hands on the front of her smudged dress. The younger generation has no respect for their mate. She shook her head sadly and started to limp off. I leaned against the counter and crossed my arms, finally relaxing a bit before something was shoved into my stomach. I yelped and looked up at Paula, who was glaring at me. The Alpha is in there, she hissed at me before pointing to the door. I glanced over at it and then down at the tray. There was a large piece of steak there, surrounded by vegetables. Wow, healthy man. I couldn't help but grin at it. Paula gave me a hard shove and picked up 2 trays for herself. That's for the Alpha, she hissed to me before I nodded. I followed her out to hear the chatting of men. I glanced around the table. 2 of the men I recognized, while the one at the head, I could only see the back of his shaved head. Don't worry, man. You'll find her. It was Joshua's voice. I quickly moved around the table to stand next to the Alpha and Beta. I tried to be as quiet as possible, but of course, being me, I caught the back of the beta's chair, sending the tray into his face and the alpha's. A growl erupted from the beta, and I heard Joshua laugh, followed by the sound of flesh hitting against flesh and pain shooting through my cheek. I squealed as I fell toward someone and my arm grazed theirs, making an electric shock go up my arm and down my spine. Suddenly, there was a blur of fur past my face, and two large wolves were attacking each other on the floor. A part of me was screaming at me to run while my wolf was shouting at me not to let the dark gray wolf be harmed. An arm wrapped around my waist as the wolves came close to me and pulled me backwards. "Are you crazy?" a voice hissed, and I looked up to see Joshua. He checked me over once before launching into his wolf form. His head nudged me out of the door before I was pushed out of the double doors. I stood there for a few seconds, completely confused by what just happened, before it snapped. My mouth suddenly went from a tight line to the jaw, hitting the floor. I had just thrown food onto both the alpha and the beta. I ran my hand through my hair before rubbing my cheek, which stung slightly. I heard the snapping of jaws and growls before the sound of howling. "You did it now." A voice inside of me spoke. I stood still for a moment before it snorted. "I'm your wolf, stupid. Forgot about me so easily?" I wanted to punch myself in the head, but I knew it wouldn't go away. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked it before it laughed. "I'm here because you found your mate, which means no more blocking me out." "Well, thanks for being there for the past 9 years. I snapped back before I could almost hear it roll its eyes. "You didn't want me here. You ignored me since you changed when you were 10. You wouldn't even let me out once. You're a selfish." "Hey," I argued back. "Who's the human here?" I heard her snort before she cut out completely. I started to pace in front of the door as I heard the noises finally decrease and be replaced by human voices, which continued to argue with each other. I couldn't make out what they were saying, so I just waited. The door was suddenly thrown open, and I jumped a little. I saw a man there standing in just jeans and grinning at me. "Hello, mate." Chapter 4. The meaning of a mate is that they are always there. They care for you when you can't, and protect you when things get rough. A person for just you, a soulmate. A person who is as perfect for you as you are for them. Now I know someone messed up. My body tensed as he stepped towards me. His grin subsided when he saw my reaction to him. He let out a short growl as I moved my foot back. "If you run," he growled to me, "I will catch you. You know that, right?" My mouth let out a small whimper and he narrowed his eyes at me. His brown eyes reminded me of melted chocolate my mother used to put on my cupcakes when I went to school. His shaved head told me he didn't have time to play around or take time for anyone. I squealed when he marched towards me. His hands went to my arms to hold me still. "I've waited 7 years for this," he growled at me before nuzzling his face into my neck and licking the skin there. A part of me wanted to run away screaming, while the other was confused by the closeness. He planted a kiss there before opening his jaws and clamping them down on my skin. A scream passed my lips and his hands slipped from my arms to my waist. His teeth retracted from my skin, and he started to lick the blood to make sure it didn't stain my skin. My legs began to wobble as they tried to hold my weight up. My senses were drifting in and out, and I could hear his loud breathing in my ear. "You're mine now, love," he whispered as I closed my eyes and let myself drift off. The coldness on my back woke me up. I shivered and brought my legs up to my chest, only to cause pain in my shoulder. I winced, and my hand reached up to touch it. The faint outline of a mark settled onto my shoulder. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and slowly stood up. The first step I took, I managed to trip over my own feet, but as I recovered, I made my way over to what I thought was the bathroom. I pulled open the door only to see a closet. I stood there completely dumbstruck. I turned back to look in the room. There wasn't a single closet or cupboard, but there was a desk against the far window and other various objects around the room. A large bed was placed in the middle and had gold-colored sheets covering the top of it, which I had recently messed up. I turned back to the closet and felt the wall for a switch. I finally found one and flicked it on. Each hanger had a suit on it. The Alpha didn't look like the guy to wear suits every single day. I made my way over to the back wall, where I parted his clothes and was relieved to find normal-looking clothes and a mirror. The mark on my shoulder caught my attention in the mirror. The scar that was forming was turning into a dark tan color, and I really didn't want to see the rest. Making my way out of the closet, I opened the next door, glad to find that it was the bathroom. After I did my business and washed my hands, I heard the sound of feet shuffling around the room. I froze for a moment before making my way over to the door. "Please be a maid. Please be a maid. Please be a maid." I said the last one out loud as I poked my head around the corner to see a woman pulling the sheets off the bed. I had seen her working in the kitchen, and I stood there, unsure what to do. She glanced over her shoulder at me and snorted. "You're very underdressed," she told me. I looked down at myself to see I was only wearing an oversized t-shirt and just my underwear. I bit down on my lip again and played with the end of the shirt. I started to bite my lip and crossed my left leg over my right, trying not to look awkward, but it wasn't working. She sighed and shook her head. "I'll get you something," she told me, leaving the room. I made my way over to the black leather couch and sat down. A few minutes later, she returned and placed a dress along with some other things in my hands. "Here, put it on and go downstairs to get breakfast." I nodded as she left with the dirty sheets and clothes before pulling on everything she gave me. Making my way out of the bedroom, I heard my stomach gurgle and I mentally laughed to myself. I think it's time to feed me. As soon as I stepped down the hallway, an arm wrapped around mine and I screamed. A girly laugh came from beside me, but a hand covered my mouth. I stared at the woman who stood there grinning. "It's okay. I'm not gonna hurt you. And neither am I." The woman from yesterday came up beside me, patting her swollen belly. "I also need to feed my baby, so can we hurry it up?" she asked us, and I nodded, taking my arm out of the younger of the two. "I'm Carly." A hand reached for mine and shook it lightly. I took my time to study Carly. Her brown hair had blonde dyed underneath it as well as dip-dyed ends. She grinned at me. "I'm the Delta's mate." I nodded my head as she blinked her sleepy green eyes. "And I'm Naomi. I was the woman screaming at Kent yesterday. I mean Beta." She grinned at me. "Why were you yelling at him?" Carly asked. "He said women were useless people and are basically only here to make babies." Jerk. That's what I said. Their conversation continued on, and I didn't try to speak, but when I heard my name pop into the conversation, I turned back in. "He also hit Lauren." I glanced at both of the women as they gasped. Hit her as in like a punch or a slap? A slap across the face, and she didn't even do anything, right, Lauren? They both looked at me, and I suddenly felt put on the spot. I bit down on my lip and stared at the ground. "It's okay. We understand." Carly patted my shoulder lightly, and we walked down 2 sets of stairs. "So, how do you like Isaac?" "I know he can be a bit harsh at times, but he's a nice man, really." I stared at her. "Isaac? Who's Isaac?" "Your mate. How do you like him?" she asked me as if she had read my mind. I thought about it before looking at Naomi. She was narrowing her eyes at something. I trailed off when I saw Sophia. She was placing flowers in a vase and placing them on the table in the foyer. "Yeah." "I know, Dash." She was cut off by Naomi, who grabbed my arm. "Stop questioning her. It's her mate." She snapped at Carly before pushing open a set of double doors into a dining room. I studied the surroundings, and it looked so girly. The walls were painted a light shade of pink, and flowers decorated the room. "This is our personal dining room since we don't eat with the men," Carly told me, taking a seat next to the head of the table. "Why?" They both looked at me as if I had grown a third head and laughed. "Because, silly, they eat more than us, and they like to have their private time to talk about, private issues in the pack. So Kent is probably complaining about me and my baby hormones again. He's such a jerk sometimes." Naomi rolled her eyes. "Oh, tell me about it." "Joshua." I didn't listen to their rants when the French toast was placed in front of me. I started to eat, wanting to get out of the room faster than I've wanted to get out of anywhere else. "Where the hell is she?" A voice boomed through the walls. I flinched and the girls laughed. "Oh, someone's in trouble," Naomi teased, pushing my arm lightly and grinning at me. I frowned as the doors were thrown open behind me. I froze in my seat. Something pulled it back, and a face appeared in front of mine. "What are you doing here?" he hissed out, and I shifted away from him in the chair. I could feel the fear growing in my eyes as his glare grew more intense. Carly thankfully jumped in to save me when I didn't answer. She was having breakfast with us, Alpha. We didn't know that she wasn't Dash. "I did not address you, Carly, so be quiet," he snapped at her, making her whole body move away from him. His eyes were back on mine, and he grabbed my upper arm in his hand. "You will be eating with us from now on. These women cannot be trusted to look after you." My eyes traveled over to my newly made friends. They were staring at him in shock and fear. Naomi was covering her huge belly while Carly sat there, unsure what to do. I was pulled to my feet and dragged from the room. His hand slowly slid from my upper arm down to my hand, in which he entwined them, and he looked back at me. "Speak," he barked, and I pulled on his hand. His low growl had now become louder, and he pulled me close to his chest. "Speak to your mate and Alpha," he commanded me. My mouth let out a whimper, and I pulled against him. Unfortunately for me, I didn't have the werewolf abilities to do so, while he had the strength to hold me here all day. His eyes narrowed down on mine. "You dare to disobey me? Speak." He shook me slightly, and I let out a cry of fear. His hand came over my mouth, and he narrowed his eyes at me. "If you do not speak, I break your hand." I shook my head. "Oh God," I whimpered. "Please don't." He smirked and moved a strand of hair behind my ear. "Better," he whispered before nuzzling his face into my neck. I felt him smell my scent there, and then kiss his mark softly. "You will learn to do what I say when I say," he whispered in my ear before pulling me into his dining room. The two males who sat at the table were very familiar to me, and I was shoved into a chair. Joshua and Kent just studied me for a moment before the Alpha took a seat next to me. An awkward tension filled the room as I stared down at my hands. Joshua sighed and shook his head. "Why is she here, Isaac?" "She's supposed to be with the women just across the Hadash. I don't want them feeding her lies about me," the man next to me hissed at him. Joshua sat back in his chair and nodded. There was a silence in the room again before Kent sighed and stood up. "I'm going to Dash." "No. I must discuss something with you both." Kent sat back down slowly, and a large plate of pancakes was set in front of me. I stared at it for a moment before pushing it away from me slightly. A growl came from beside me, and I glanced over at him. Once again, I found him glaring at me. "Eat," he ordered, shoving a fork into my right hand. He pulled the plate back towards me, and I slowly started to cut a small chunk out of the ginormous pile. I swallowed back the tears which were forming in my throat. I saw my mate's nod of approval from the corner of my eye and started to eat. While I was traveling, I realized that we are not up to date with some of the traditions that other packs have with each other. "No, Joshua, we are not getting rid of your position." I watched Joshua sink into his chair and sigh in relief. "No, this involves my mate." An arm draped over the back of my chair, and I moved forward slightly. Normally, I just do a big pack meeting to show off my new mate, but I went to a pack where when they find their new alpha female, the whole pack goes for a run across the territory. "A run?" Ken asked from beside me. "As in wolf form? What about the elders of the pack?" "There is no way they are getting into wolf form. It's a new way of accepting someone into the pack. If it doesn't work, then we'll go back to the old way, and I'll host a pack meeting. Simple as that." Oh God. I felt bile rise in my throat. The thought of either going for a run or walking out in front of hundreds of people made me want to vomit. I covered my mouth and pushed my chair back. I rushed into the busy kitchen and into the servant toilets before throwing up in the toilet. The sound of boots came into the room as I pulled back from the toilet and leaned against the wall. I could feel a pair of eyes on me, and a hand reached down to touch my shoulder. "Are you okay?" His voice was actually kind for once. I let my eyes travel up to his as he stared at me. His face was covered in worry, and I pushed myself to my feet. "I'll take you to the Dr. Dash." "No," I snapped at him. He raised an eyebrow at me, and I looked to the floor. "No," I whispered again before walking down the hall. "You were just sick. I think you should go see a doctor. What if you have a virus or wolf flu?" I could have the human flu, but it wouldn't matter because I don't. I shook my head. Well, at least sit down and rest. I turned around and glared at him. Leave me alone, I shouted at him. He stopped following me and tilted his head. My breathing came faster as I turned the corner and banged into a hard chest. Chapter 5. I stumbled back and fell into another chest. A deep chuckle came from behind me, making me flinch away. So this is your mate, son? A hand gripped my chin, and I was looking into a pair of familiar eyes. Except the face wasn't. His hair was graying, and his smile was wide and proud. Those eyes, though. I had seen them before. My chin was tugged slightly to the right and then the left. She's very beautiful. She has no respect, though. Respect? I watched the older man shake his head and sigh. Respect is always earned. Like trust. He dropped his hand away from my face and smiled at me. It's nice to meet you. He shook my hand softly before I was shoved out of the way. I winced as an arm crushed into my stomach and pushed me back. Once again, I was staring at the back of my new alpha. He wouldn't let me, now or ever. Do not touch her again. Now, son, she will be my daughter-in-law. I don't care. A growl erupted from his throat, and I took a step away from the angry alpha. You're scaring your mate, son. His head whipped around to mine, and his eyes bored into mine. It was like he was searching my soul for something he couldn't find. My mate is fine. It's yours. You should be worried about. He snapped at his father, and he grabbed my wrist. His father frowned. That is no way to talk to your elder Dash. Don't push me, old man. He growled at him before turning around and dragging me through the large house. I stumbled over my feet behind him. Hurry up, he snapped at me, making me try to walk up to his side. Fresh air hit my skin, and I froze. The loud noise of laughter, talking, and shouting came into my ears, making me want to curl up into a ball and cry. My ears seemed to be burning from the loud noise, and I hated it. Someone tugged at my arm, and I was being dragged through the garden, thankfully away from the noise and towards the forest. We stopped near the edge, and I glanced over at Isaac. He was taking off his shirt, and he glanced at me. Well, he asked. What are you waiting for? My eyes grew wide, and I stared at him. I didn't know how to shift. I have no idea what to do. My breathing stopped, and I stared at him. He growled lightly, and he stripped off his long pants and then his boxers. I averted my eyes from him, but my wolf was demanding that I look at him. One day you will mate with me, and you will see me naked. Why not now, he told me, turning my chin to him. His eyes were gentle and completely unknown to me. They looked so alien compared to the ones I had only seen 5 minutes ago. I heard him sigh and plant a kiss on my forehead. I'll shift and wait for you, he told me as he took off running into the forest. I got a glance of him changing into a wolf and running off into the forest. I looked down at his clothes that were just thrown on the floor. I reached down for his shirt and brought it up to my nose. I inhaled the scent and sighed in pleasure. It smelled like him, like chocolate and roses. I gently folded it neatly and placed it back on the floor. I picked up the pants and boxers, making sure to fold them neatly and place them in the small pile I had created. I put his shoes next to his and reached down to take off mine. The new shoes were giving me blisters, and it felt good to have the air on them. You're not going to let me out, are you? My wolf asked, and I shook my head. I was embarrassed to tell him I couldn't, or just tell him I didn't know how to. I bit my lip and held my shoes in my hands. After a few minutes, a dark gray wolf approached me and whimpered. I can't, I whispered to him and shook my head. I heard howls coming from the forest. There were at least 5 of them, and they all sounded very impatient. I watched his eyes shift from me and then back to the forest and then back to me. I saw his eyes narrow at the ground, and he bounded into the forest, leaving me there alone. I sat down against the tree and waited. I heard a rustling in the bushes beside me. My eyes snapped over to a nearby bush and stared at it. A wet nose poked out and then a body. It was Isaac. His gray fur rubbed up against me, and I hurried to my feet. He sniffed at his clothes, and I saw his fur starting to subside from his back. I quickly grabbed his clothes as the wolf rose up on his back feet, and he stared at me. Why didn't you change? He asked me, grabbing his boxers from my hands. I stared at his chest. How badly I wanted to run my hands over his six-pack. I forced my eyes back up to his, and he smirked. Like what you see, he asked me, making me blush and turn my head away from him. I heard a zipper being pulled up, and the last piece of clothing was taken from my hands. Thank you for looking after my things, he told me before slipping his feet into his shoes. He turned to me, and I was suddenly trapped between his body and the tree. You still didn't answer my question, he told me, and I swallowed. His warm breath spread across my face, and I stared at him. His hand stroked the side of my face before cupping it. Are you afraid of me? His words came out in a whimper, and I flinched away from him, making my head hit the tree behind me. His forehead finally rested against mine, and he closed his eyes. You don't have to be afraid, he whispered to me. I was surprised by his words. They actually stunned me. This big, bad alpha had been threatening to break my wrists one moment, and now he's telling me I don't need to be afraid. And I thought I had problems. His head was suddenly off mine, and he swiveled around. I could hear laughter from nearby, and it was coming closer. Over his shoulder, I saw 5 large men laughing and coming this way. I got to their chests when I realized they were naked. Hey, Alpha. We're done with our patrol. Hey, who's your lady friend? The largest one spoke, wiggling his eyebrows. Maybe we can join in the fun dash. Like hell you will. Put some clothes on, you stupid boys. They all mumbled their apologies, and I picked up my shoes from the floor. Isaac turned back to me. I'm sorry about them. They're just the boys. He cleared his throat and turned his head over his shoulder. What is it? We found Dash. Stop mumbling and speak up. We found traces of rogues coming in from the west side, Alpha. They seem to be related to the ones that have been attacking the smaller packs in the area. I heard Isaac mutter something, but I didn't catch what he said. I knew rogues were never good. Tell everyone to stay inside the pack house until further notice, and if anyone goes outside, make sure they are punished. He nodded and ran past us. He looked back at me. We'll continue our conversation in my office. I sat down on the couch and looked up at Isaac as he shuffled through the files on his desk. His expression turned to anger, and he growled. That stupid man. I watched as he threw all the files onto the floor and papers went flying. Must I do everything? He shouted before opening the double doors wide and calling out for someone to get his beta. The doors were slammed shut, and I jumped a little. His head turned to mine, and he stared at me. Tell me, he said, coming towards me and throwing himself down next to me. Why did you not run with me? He threw his arm over the back of the couch and looked at me. He was giving me his full attention, and I stared around the room at the papers on the floor. I don't shift, I told him, and he laughed. A wolf that doesn't shift. My mate is a comedian. I looked at him with full seriousness. His laughter died, and he tilted his head. You are serious? Why wouldn't you want to shift? He moved my hair away from my face, and I moved away from him. I just don't. That's no excuse, Dash. There was knocking on the door, and Isaac stood. Come in. I saw him straighten his collar, and Kent came in. He glanced around the room before looking back at his Alpha. Do you see this? Isaac asked him, and Kent nodded. I do, Alpha. And do you know why it's on the floor? No, Alpha. Did you reorganize my files? No, Alpha. Don't lie to me. He shouted at him, making his beta cower. Yes, Alpha. Why would you reorganize my files? I was trying to look for a treaty, Dash. A treaty? Didn't I tell you if anything concerned another pack, then you were to call me? Yes, Alpha, but Dash. You disobeyed my orders. But Dash. You know what we do with people who disobey orders, don't you, Kent? Yes, Alpha, but Dash. Stop saying, but you blabbering idiot. Tonight you sleep downstairs. Yes, Alpha. As for you, mate, he thought for a second before Kent fell to his knees. Please don't hurt my mate, Alpha. She's with my child. If you must hurt her, then hurt me instead. I deserve everything. Kent started to sob at his Alpha's feet, and Isaac made a face of disgust. Fine, double your scouting to show how loyal you are. I shall tell you when your punishment is finished. The beta bowed and quickly left the room. Isaac turned to me and shut the doors behind him. He must have seen the expression on my face. "Oh, Lauren." He shook his head and started to pick the papers off the floor. "I only have to use my alpha position when I must, and my beta has disobeyed crucial orders." I picked up the piece of paper from my feet and handed it to him. My hands were shaking from being in the same room as such a powerful person. I began to pick up more papers which were scattered around the room. "What are you doing?" a voice barked at me from behind. I flinched and looked over my shoulder at him. The papers were snatched from my hands, and he stared down at me. "Go lie on the couch," he told me. I stared at him, and he gave me a shove over to the couch. I stumbled forward and sat down. He growled at me and shoved me into a lying position. I stayed there for a few seconds as he turned his back so I could get comfortable. I watched as he collected the last paper from the floor and put it on his desk. "Tell me about yourself, Lauren," he said, taking a seat in his large chair. He put his feet up on the desk, trying to look casual when his posture was as stiff as mine. Except his was stiff with protectiveness and mine with fear. He waited for an answer and he sighed. "All right. Tell me about your family. What do your parents do? Do you have any siblings?" I continued to stare at him for a moment before nodding. "A sister." He smiled at me. "So do I. I think you would like her. She's very energetic." He nodded his head. I remember Georgina saying something about that. "What sort of pack do you come from? A larger one than this or smaller?" I had to think for a second. "It was most likely much smaller than this one." "Smaller." He nodded, trying to get a picture of what kind of pack I came from. "What about friends? Did you have any friends?" The thought made me shake my head. The only friend I had was a stuffed animal in my room, and he never talked. I watched him stroke his cheeks in thought and nod. "All right. So what rank were your parents? Were they quite high or low?" "My father. He worked for the Alpha most of the time. My mother used to be the Beta's girlfriend before he found his mate." He tilted his head to the side and thought. "Interesting. Has your sister found her mate?" "She's 14. "Good. You're 19. I nodded, and he put his hands behind his head while leaning back in his chair. "I'm 22. A good age gap between us." There was silence between us again. It was like he was waiting for an answer to an unknown question. "So tell me about your fears. Perhaps we can find the reason why you are so afraid." My eyes traveled to the ceiling. The wolves drawn there seemed to be in perfect balance as they leapt across the meadow they were drawn into. "I don't know," my voice came out in a whisper. "Are you afraid of me?" His question made me think for a while. Was I really afraid of him? I nodded quietly, and he sighed. "Perhaps we should change that first. You don't have to be afraid of your own mate. I'm here to protect you for a reason." "I know," I whispered, and he shook his head. "Is there anything you want to ask me?" I looked up at him for a moment. "Why is your pack so against women?" He barked out laughing and then shook his head. "Most of the time here, they get in the way. We have a large pack, Lauren, and with most of the women having babies all the time, it's hard to manage them all." "So we get in the way?" "I didn't mean it like that. I just mean that the males cannot be there every second of the day. Like when you have our son Dash. Or daughter," I corrected him. "Yes, right? Well, when we have our child, I will most likely not be there for the birth. Of course, if I am, it will be a rare occasion." I flinched away from him. "So I'll be alone? Then there's no way I'm having a child." He saw my reaction and let his head droop backwards. "Of course you wouldn't understand," he murmured, but I could still hear him. His mark had made everything stronger, even though I don't have the full package until I turn into a wolf again. "Of course I don't understand," I snapped at him. My sudden outbreak makes him look at me in surprise, and then he relaxes a little and crosses his arms over his chest. I sit up and curl my legs into my chest. I leaned my forehead on my knees and closed my eyes. "I wouldn't be there because I would be fighting for you both. I'd be off making new treaties so my son doesn't have to deal with any enemies when he comes of age." I turned my head away from his and opened my eyes. "And, because of this, I would probably not be there for most of his childhood." I looked up at him. Childhood is the most important time in a person's life. I should know because I cut myself off, thinking of the horrible childhood I had. The pushing of trying to be Miss Perfect and become the alpha's son's mate. I'd rather be the runt of the pack than be what my mother wanted me to be. She got what she wanted, though. Like always. Because? He asked me, and I crossed my legs and looked down at my hands. Why would it matter? Moments ago, you said you didn't care for women. I never said that, Dash. But you meant it. I stood up on shaky feet and headed over to the door. I placed my hand on the door handle and pulled it open. I looked over my shoulder at him. He was now sitting upright in his chair and sorting through papers like nothing had happened. I stepped out and closed the door behind me quietly. Someone had messed up massively. Chapter 6. I shoved the carrot around my plate with my fork. We should face them head-on. They wouldn't be expecting it as normal, but Kent seemed to trail off in thought, and James shook his head. No, they would know. We should take them by surprise. Rogues are stupid and are always looking for a fight. I heard Isaac sigh from next to me. Perhaps Isaac mused. It had been all they talked about at dinner. Rogues this and rogues that. It bored me to death, and I'd rather be fed lies than be here listening to this. They have been attacking smaller packs as well, maybe turning some young wolves against their packs. They would not have enough to face us head-on alone. So you think they're waiting, Alpha? Of course they are. When they find our weak point, they will target just that. There was silence at the table. And what is our weak point, Alpha? Isaac thought for a moment before leaning back in his chair. Some would say our weak-minded females, others are young children. My fingers clenched around my fork until my knuckles began to turn white. I clenched my teeth together and shoved the food into my mouth, chewing aggressively. I believe it is our weakest member of the pack. It's not our omega. We have none. It's our most sacred member. From the words, I knew who he was talking about. I swallowed the food I had basically chewed to mush and turned to him. May I leave? I asked him. He looked at me and tilted his head. Wouldn't you want to listen to our discussion? Jerk face. No, thank you. I must prepare for bed, I whispered, and he shrugged. I shall be up soon. Standing to my feet quietly, I left the room as quickly as possible. I could hear them quickly continue the conversation, and I shut the doors behind me. Oh, someone was having dinner with a big tough alpha. My head snapped up to Sophia's, and she grinned at me. So you're the alpha's prisoner? She looped her arm through mine and led me towards the stairs. I heard that he doesn't let you out of his sight for a second. My eyes stayed on the floor, and Sophia sighed. Anyway, I'm taking you out for a barbecue tomorrow. What do you think? It will only be in the garden. I don't know, I questioned her. Isaac will probably want me by his side all day like normal and question me as if there were no tomorrow. Isaac will probably dash. Oh, you're on a first-name basis. That's good. She bumped my shoulder with her own and grinned at me. Everything all right? I stared at her for a second before heading up the second flight of stairs. She grabbed my shoulder and turned me around to face her. Hey, I know he's a sexist jerk, but tell me that you haven't met any of those before. He's an alpha. He thinks low of everyone, including his own mate. My eyes traveled to the floor, and I heard a cough behind her. My eyes looked up at Isaac's, and my eyes widened. So you're also feeding lies to my mate? He crossed his arms, and Sophia turned around slowly. No, Alpha, I was just Dash. Go to your room, Sophia. I will have a talk with your mate tomorrow. But Dash. Get out of my sight, he hissed, and she scurried off, leaving me with Isaac. He took 3 long strides, and he was in front of me on the stairs. I should explain myself in my room. He nodded up the stairs before lifting me off my feet, making me squeal. He chuckled, and I clutched to him with everything I had. I'm not going to drop you, he told me, but I didn't listen. I kept my hands tightly attached to his shirt as he carried me up the rest of the stairs and into his room. I let him set me down on my feet, and I straightened out the front of my dress. He slowly walked over to the cabinet in the corner and opened it. Would you like some brandy? Whiskey, perhaps? Wait, what am I saying? You're a woman. My eyes bored into the back of his head, hoping it would go through. I took a seat on the couch and continued to glare at his back. I heard him grab a glass and start to pour himself something containing alcohol. Finally, he turned around to face me. He took a sip of his drink and walked towards me. So, Lauren, I believe we still have much to discuss. You left me with unanswered questions in the study. I cannot read your mind until we mate fully. I shuffled back away from him and brought my legs up onto the leather couch next to me. He seemed to be in deep thought for a moment before smiling. All right, what is your favorite thing to do? There was a silence between us and he sighed. Example, I like to practice my fighting skills and I would like to train my son. His words made my eyes narrow down at him. Right, I muttered. The sudden impulse to take his glass of alcohol away from him overtook me, and I grabbed it from his hand. My turn to ask questions, I told him, swallowing the liquid in the glass. It burned my throat as it traveled down, and I shook my head. You're going to tell me why you think women are so inferior to men. He cleared his throat and crossed his arms over his chest. I will not deny what is true, Dash. My hand came forward and slapped his face. His head whipped to the side, and I saw his jaw clench. The sudden impulse to say everything on my mind overtook me, and I think part of my wolf was trying to get out. Well, what you think is the truth is a lie. Getting to my feet, I made my way over to the counter. I unlatched the lid of one of the large bottles and started to swallow it down. The burning in my throat sent a pleasurable sensation through my body. I've wanted to say this for a while now. A hiccup erupted from my mouth, and I squeezed my eyes shut. You're a jerk, I said, pointing to a random place in the room. My vision had become as blurry as fog, and I couldn't stand on my feet. If you knew what women do for you men, you would think that you were inferior. A pair of eyes appeared in front of mine. Yes? Go on. Tell me of these things you do for us. We give you everything. We give you love. I started to count on my fingers. We care for you, we provide another generation of your family for you, and female wolves save themselves for their true mates. Now Dash. What do men give, huh? Oh, I know. They're selfish, unreliable pigs who think that everything is okay if they say sorry. Well, it's not, okay? If you really want a pup, then change your attitude. I started to drink from the bottle again. It was suddenly taken from my hands and placed on the table next to me. You are very confident when you talk to just me. I wonder why that is. He seemed amused by the whole thing. I narrowed my eyes at him and pointed at him. I hate you. I want to go home. That's not happening, he said, pushing me towards the bed. Well then, I reject you. His chest bellowed with laughter when he heard my words. A woman cannot reject her mate. That is only for a man. Well then, you will never fully mate with me, I told him, dropping down onto the bed. He chuckled and smoothed my hair away from my face. We shall see. We shall see. My eyelids dropped over my eyes, and I finally fell asleep. The sound of someone slipping shoes onto their feet woke me from my dreaming state. The foot was placed on the floor, and someone sighed. There was a light knock on the door, and I froze where I was. Someone sighed, and there was the sound of the door opening. What? And keep your voice down, Isaac hissed to someone on the other side of the door. Scouts were able to find traces of a rogue on the outlands. A female, one of the men confirmed. Isaac sighed and shut the door quietly. I peeked out of my left eye and looked around the room. I groaned when my head started to pound with a headache. My hands went up and clutched it. Squeezing my eyes tight before opening them up, I sat up slowly. A pillow and a bunch of blankets were lying on the couch. Sleeping in the same room as me is the first nice thing he's done. There was a light knock on the door, which made me groan, and I sat up. A young woman came in. She was different from the one yesterday. Her bright smile almost made me cringe back from it. Hi, my name is Danielle. I'm here to do what you say and whatever. So you're my maid? She nodded her head enthusiastically and grinned at me. Is there anything you would like me to get you? A dress? Water? Aspirin? I shook my head, which only made me groan and clutch it. Some tea would be nice and some clothes. She nodded and hurried off. I walked into the bathroom. I quickly stripped off the clothes I had on and stepped into the shower. The water was a relief on my tense body, and I let myself relax. I was slow to wash my hair and finally step out. I wrapped a towel around me and decided to make my way into the bedroom. Danielle was humming to herself as she put the tray of tea on the table and poured some hot water into the white mug. Here you go. She passed me the cup, and I started to sip on it. It's pretty hot out today, so I got you some shorts and a shirt. Approval of the alpha, of course. She smiled at me again. Call me if you need anything. I'll be just outside. I nodded my head, and she left quickly. I placed down the cup of tea and pulled on the clothes she got me. Where the heck do they get these from? I shook the thought out of my head and prepared for the day ahead of me. I leaned back on the couch and chewed on the end of the pencil. I began to draw a set of eyes I hadn't seen in years but knew so well. Isaac was trying to concentrate on his work, but I could tell I was distracting him, and I would grin if I could, but I was too into this. I suggest we start training them younger, Alpha. Perhaps the age of 13 instead of 15. Isaac glanced over at me again, making me hide my face more and snigger. Raising the age won't do anything. But it will teach the young children to use their defenses. What if they change late? Then they are at a disadvantage. If we start training at a young age, it won't take so long to work out the pecking order. Very well. I shall drop it to 10. 10 Alpha. That is when they learn to control their abilities. At least the male population does. Yes, Alpha. I shall call a pack meeting tomorrow. Spread the word. The man bowed and left. As soon as he left, I glared at Isaac. 10. I asked him, and he shrugged and stared at a file. The pen in his left hand began to flicker over the page. I don't understand the problem. Strong warriors start to advance at that age. So, they're just children. Not soldiers you can command around like they were fully trained warriors. How would you know any of this? You're a woman, and I am Alpha. Oh yeah, and women have no opinion in this pack at all, right? I am not my father, Dash. What does this have to do with your father? I hissed at him. His eyes narrowed at me. If you were here when my father was Alpha, everything would have been different. So he respected women? No, he barked out before he put a finger and thumb to the bridge of his nose and started to massage it there. Yes, he respected women. He respected them too much, though. My mother was his ruler. She had a say in everything, even if she wanted a boy or a girl. Of course, my mother wanted a girl, but she got me. So they tried again and got my younger sister. Do you want to know something? He said, looking up at me. I sat up and glared at him. What? I will not be pushed around by some woman, even if she is my mate. I know it's me who is supposed to change for you, but I will not. I will not change for you. You will change for me. Understand this, Lauren. You must change into a wolf now. There was a silence between us before I crossed my arms in front of my chest. No, I will not change for you. He growled softly. You will change, Lauren. I will make sure of it, he told me. Now get up and do it now. I stood up and glared at him. I won't change for you. Ever. He pushed his chair back and straightened up. Must I usher your wolf out? I will see her. No, you won't, I argued back. He was soon standing in front of me. His upper lip twitched in frustration, and he grabbed my wrist in his large hand. What way do you want me to do this? The easy way or the hard way? No way, because I'm not doing it. His head shook side to side. I guess the hard way. There was a sharp pull on my arm and then a slight sound coming from my shoulder. In a matter of seconds, my body was in agony. My hand went up to clutch my arm, and I screamed out in pain. My vision had started to go in and out of focus while Isaac stood there. His hard, strong face had turned to a worried, panicked one. My name was called out continuously by him, and strong arms clutched my back as I swayed towards the floor. Chapter 7. If you were to change, I wouldn't have had to stir your wolf. He stood beside me, and I glared up at him. Well, it didn't work. Did it? He stared at me for a moment before turning his back to me. Then perhaps mating will bring her out. The doctor who was working on my arm cleared his throat. Shall I leave you two to discuss your private matters? No, it's fine. The doctor nodded and finally put a sling around my arm. You dislocated your shoulder. I looked down at the floor. Great, now he's talking to me. My mate sure is very accident-prone. Perhaps we should get a room just for her. The two men chuckled, and I glared at the floor. Stupid mate. Perhaps we should. Make sure she doesn't do anything too aggressive with this arm. I don't want it worse than it is. Thank you, doctor. I shall have her on bed rest. They nodded to each other, and Isaac hoisted me up by my good wrist. Come back in a few weeks. I shall have another look at it. Isaac nodded and put his hand on the small of my back so he could lead me out. Make this a lesson, Lauren. You obey me, and I won't hurt you. He leaned down to my ear and whispered, Trust me, I don't like hurting you. I just want to go home, I told him, and he shook his head. You will not leave me, mate. We are yet to mate and become each other's forever. Dreading every moment of it, by the way, I told him, and I heard him chuckle lightly. Perhaps I will have to convince you that I am the best choice for you. Gee, let me guess. Break my other arm, maybe my leg, and punch me in the face. No. I've established that harming you will not get to your inner wolf. She probably hates me right now. I could never hate you. I heard an inner voice say, Shut up. I heard a whimper and something cower within me. Is there anything I can do to get you to trust me? You're kidding me, right? Trust is not earned overnight. It takes time. All right. I shall earn your trust by the next full moon. I rolled my eyes and put my hand on the banister of the stairs. You won't. I am Alpha, I can. Alpha does not give you an advantage with me, I told him truthfully. The look in his eyes told it all. He was screwed. You may have dinner with the ladies. Isaac interrupted my thoughts. What? He sighed and stopped. I stopped as well. You may have dinner with the ladies, if you wish. Are you serious? I whispered to him. Unless you want to eat with my 2 men and me, then I am totally serious. Thank you, I whispered to him and hobbled over to the other doors away from him. Wait. I froze, thinking he was going to tell me he was joking, and I had to go in with him. My kiss. I flinched and turned around. I don't want to. I was cut off by him wrapping his arms around my waist and pulling me to him. He was careful not to crush my injured arm and pecked me on the lips before kissing my shoulder. I shall see you soon. If not, then I will come looking for you. I nodded my head and pulled away from him. I opened the doors with my uninjured arm, and a maid looked up at me. She quickly looked down, realizing who I was. Food was placed on the table by a few others, and I finally took my seat at the top of the table. Good morning, Luna. What would you like this morning? We have just about everything, a very enthusiastic servant asked me. He was much smaller than any of the men that were normally strutting around the place. He was most likely one of the smaller wolves of the pack. Just give her some toast, a voice interrupted my thinking. Naomi slumped down in the seat next to me, and Carly slowly drifted into the room after her. So Isaac finally trusts us? She asked me and looked down at the table. I don't know, I muttered. He's very confusing. I let myself trail off and then sigh. So, what happened to your arm? Carly asked me before shoving some bacon into her mouth. He or Isaac? I suddenly became nervous, and my hand started to itch like I had been bitten by a mosquito. My right hand reached over to scratch the knuckles on my left. I pushed my chair back and backed towards the door. I have to go. A man behind me opened the door for me, and I let myself out. Hurrying up the stairs, I stopped when I heard Isaac's voice. How long will you be staying for? For a moment, I thought he was asking me. Turning around, I quickly discovered he was talking to a woman I hadn't seen before. She looked like she was in her early 20s, and her head was covered in black hair that reached past her shoulders. To me, she looked like a devil in disguise as a beautiful being. I was thinking I could stay for a while, Alpha. I mean, if you wouldn't mind, I would like to stay in a pack. She started to trail a finger up and down his chest. Something in my chest started to boil in anger, and Isaac cleared his throat. I'm sure we can find a room for you somewhere. Of course, Alpha. I would be of good use, she said. My hand clutched the handrail in anger. Stop her. My wolf growled out. She is touching our mate. Get rid of her. He is ours. She was fighting against her cage to get out, and she was so very close. My body began to shake as I tried to contain her. Isaac, I finally squeaked out. His eyes snapped up to me, and he pushed the woman away. Lauren. She is nothing to me. She isn't you. He took long strides to reach me until he was inches from my face. I stepped up to the next step, so I was now the same height as him. Leave me alone, I growled at him, letting her peek at my wolf. He seemed slightly taken aback by my words, but he shook them off quickly before grabbing my legs and throwing me over his shoulder. "I will never leave you alone," he growled back. I let my head lift up, and I caught the eye of the girl standing there with her arms crossed over her chest and glaring at me. Chapter 8. A blanket was draped over my shoulders as I huddled on the bench in the training yard. The loud sound of teeth clamping onto another person's skin made me cringe. The person who had given me a blanket sat down next to me and watched the young men in front of us fight it out. They were mostly between the ages of 16 and 29, but some of them looked older. I glanced over at the girl to see her sitting cross-legged on the bench and tapping her fingers on her knee to a random beat. "I haven't seen you around before." She faced me on the bench and stuck out her hand. "My name is Tatiana." Her whole body posture screamed confidence. She sat up straight, and her dark hair was pulled back into a ponytail. I shook her hand lightly and turned my head back to the men. "Lauren," I muttered, and she nodded happily. She studied the crowd for a moment before leaning back on the seat. Her green eyes swept over the crowd in search of something. "The man with the dark hair over there is my mate," she told me. I glanced over to where she was looking. I guessed her mate was the taller one with the black hair that was tied back at the nape of his neck. I would say it went down to his shoulders if it wasn't tied. The scar that ran from the top of his left eyebrow down his face told a different story than his gentle look would suggest. He was wrestling a much younger man. Tatiana's mate had him in a headlock, and they were heading for the floor. "His name is Jonathan. He's one of the nicest men you'll meet out there, but he's a pain in the neck most of the time." She grumbled the last part, making me giggle. She turned her head to look at me again. "So, which one is your mate?" I suppose it was natural to guess that a stranger would have been welcomed into the pack because of their mate. My eyes swept over the crowd to land on Isaac near the back. He's over there," I said, nodding to Isaac and the older man who was now on the floor, looking in a lot of pain. Tatiana looked over there and winced. "Aren't you going to go over there? Your mate looks really badly hurt," she asked in confusion. It was obvious why she thought that, and I pulled the blanket further around me. "The one on the floor isn't my mate," I muttered. She looked over at me before looking back at Isaac. Her eyebrows quickly went into an arch, and she leaned back. "You're Isaac's mate, huh? I wouldn't imagine you as an alpha's mate. More of a warrior's." There was a silence between Isaac and us, and Isaac looked up at us. He glanced at Tatiana for a second before grabbing a towel and wiping the sweat off his face. I didn't understand how he could be getting all hot and sweaty. It was colder than a freezer out here, and he still made me come out. He was suddenly throwing the towel on the nearest rack and looking back at us. I watched as he stalked over to us and held out his hand for me to take. "It is nice to see you, Tatiana. How is Jonathan?" It surprised me that Isaac even knew Tatiana. She was one of the hundreds of female mates. Like greeting an old friend, she shrugged. "He's fine." "I wasn't aware you had found your mate. Have you been keeping her from the pack?" Her eyes gleamed in amusement, and Isaac shook his head. "No. I'm announcing her at the meeting on Saturday. If you're not there again, dash." "Hey, that wasn't my fault. I had to take care of Ross. He had been up all night with his crying." I suddenly felt so left out of this conversation. Was Ross her child? A pet? I wouldn't even know. I bit my lip and looked down at my feet so I could try to look less awkward. "Well, thank you anyway for looking after my mate Tatiana, but it was not needed." "Yes, it was," she shot back before standing to her feet and moving away. I was shocked by her sudden outburst and watched her walk towards her mate. My attention was pulled back to Isaac. He looked down at me and tilted his head to the side. "Would you like to go inside? I'll make one of the maids get you a hot drink." "Sure," I stumbled over my words. He lifted me to my feet and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. He guided me out of the training yard and through the young children who were playing. It looked like rough playing with the guys tackling each other and then giggling. The thought of these young children once turning into uncontrollable beasts sent chills down my spine. It scared me to think like that. Isaac saw my reaction to the children and sighed. "I'm sure the children in your pack were the same. This is a process that every male in the pack goes through. They will find out who is the strongest and put themselves into a food chain. Simple enough, don't you think?" he asked me, and I looked up at him. They are too young, I whispered. He shook his head in disagreement. If you were to learn the ways of a pack when you were young, then you would have learned this. This is part of survival for a pack. It's how we defend our pack from hunters, rogues, and other packs. If our children did not learn to fight at a young age, then we would not exist today. I crossed my arms over my chest and wrapped the blanket around me further. And what about the girls? I asked him. He shrugged his shoulders. I am not one to interfere with their stupid dress-up hours and make-up times. The muscles in his arms clenched and then unclenched as he was trying to fight a memory. From the look on his face, it was an embarrassing one. So girls don't really sort themselves out? I asked him. He snorted. Hardly. They are too busy trying to catch the boys' attention to put themselves in line. Plus, there would not be a point. They would get the same status as their mate anyway. How sexist of him. Jerk. I started to walk more quickly to try and escape him. He seemed amused by my attempt at escape and could easily keep up. You certainly are playful when you want to be, he mused, always staying one step behind me. I seem to be bringing you out of your shell more than I intended. I snorted lightly, and I was suddenly being lifted from the ground. I squealed and started to fight the stupid man behind me. He chuckled and placed a light kiss on his mark, making my knees go weak. Perhaps it's time to start trying to create my air. He turned me around to face him. His face was suddenly coming too close for comfort, and I started to lean back. I slapped his chest hard, trying to get him to straighten up. He didn't seem to get the point and grabbed the back of my neck. I yelped in surprise and put my hand on his face, trying to make him back up. Bad move. His teeth clamped down on the skin between my thumb and my index finger. I glared at him and managed to punch him in the face. He growled and let me go. I tumbled to the floor and looked up at him. He wiped the blood starting to dribble out from his nose, and he glared at me. Did you just punch me? He growled, and my eyes went wide. He was suddenly grabbing the front of my shirt and pulling me to my feet. I turned my head away from him, preparing for him to hurt me. I squeezed my eyes shut, but the pain never came. Instead, I felt him breathing on my neck and then nuzzling it. He planted a kiss there, and I looked at him. It was good, he whispered in my ear before pulling back to study my face. He was suddenly grinning at me. Just remember to clench your fist harder, Isaac said as he tightened his grasp around my hand. That way you won't break it. He muttered and kissed my knuckles. He looked up at me at my shocked expression. I had no idea what was going on. He smirked. Perhaps I have found a way to try and lure your wolf out. I watched as he suddenly went off into thought, thinking of something before shaking his head and wiping the blood beneath his nose off with his left hand. I think we should both get cleaned up before lunch, he told me, and I nodded. I watched him walk ahead, and I slowly followed him. I'm so confused. Chapter 9. The button on my pants seemed like it would pop off with the amount of food I had just eaten. The mates seemed to hover for a while until Isaac would nod his head in appreciation and dismiss them. I leaned back in my chair and pushed the plate away. Isaac glanced over at my food-covered plate and back to me. You still have food on your plate, he told me, and I looked at it. Yeah, I'm full. There are people in this pack who are not as privileged as you, and you can't even eat the food that's been laid out in front of you. Then show me to these not as privileged people so I can share my food with them, I said, grabbing the plate and standing to my feet. I heard Isaac growl and yank me back down. You will do no such thing. If you have finished, then leave it here. Placing the plate down on the table, trying not to spill anything, I finally sat down again. He watched me while I sat there, and he ate. It was like he was the babysitter, and I was the ignorant child that seemed to always be in trouble. I slumped back in my seat and sighed, trying to act annoyed. Later, I must speak to some alphas, he told me after swallowing his mouthful. It will be a meeting that will take a few hours. Finally. Some time away from this, Jay. And you're obliged to be there. I groaned internally, and my wolf seemed to shuffle around within me. How many alphas? I found myself asking. My wolf had somehow found a crack in my wall and was trying to sneak through. I was quick to push her back and seal it. Isaac's face continued to keep a blank expression, and he swallowed another mouthful of steak. 5 to 7. I could hear my wolf howl at the sound of it, but my human side trembled at the sound of so many powerful people in one room at once. "I'm not going," I said quickly. He grunted and shifted in his chair. "You're going," he muttered, and I crossed my arms over my chest. "Why do I have to go?" "It's not like you are going to discuss me," I cut myself off when he smirked. "Is it going to be boring?" I asked him, and he shrugged. "You'll be meeting a few alphas and their mates. Hopefully, you'll make a few friends and learn a few things from them." He scraped some peas onto his fork and shoved them into his mouth. His once full plate was now empty and looking rather dull. "Why can't I just ask your mother for advice?" "She seems nice, Dash." "You will not be asking my parents anything. They are completely off limits to you, all right?" His voice had gone lower than I had ever heard it as he spoke the warning, and I had to lean back a bit before nodding my head. He stood up and stretched his arms. "How many alphas have been in this house?" I asked him. He stopped stretching and looked down at me. "About 266. Our pack has been around for a long time. It was one of the first packs." "Oh, Jesus." I leaned my forehead onto the palm of my hand and groaned. I heard him chuckle. "Don't be nervous." Someone knocked on the dining room door and opened it. A young maid came in and curtsied. "Alpha. The other alphas will be here soon. Do you want me to take Luna and get her dressed?" Isaac nodded once before giving me a little shove towards the girl. "Thank you, Annie. Tell Paul the first said hi." She nodded happily and turned away from us. "Don't be stubborn," he muttered into my hair as he kissed the top of my head and walked out of the dining room. I sighed as I followed the girl up the stairs and into my bedroom. She hummed happily as she walked into the wardrobe. I walked over to the door to see her looking at a bunch of dresses and throwing some behind her. "No," she muttered as a yellow one came into view. "No, no, no," she muttered for the next 3 and so on. She scrunched up her nose at a purple one and threw it straight at me, making me fall over. She glanced behind her, and her eyes went wide. "Oh, Luna, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. Are you okay?" She quickly helped me up to my feet, and I couldn't help but giggle. She was adorable. "I'm fine. Perhaps I can help." She nodded her head happily, and I stepped over the dresses which had been thrown onto the floor. I glanced at the rack hidden behind suits and shirts which belonged to Isaac. So he has been hiding a secret stash of clothes behind here. "Oh, what about this?" Annie held up a dark blue dress and shoved it at me. I took a step back in shock and looked at it. "It's nice." I ran my hand over the comfortable fabric. "Yeah, and I'm sure you'll catch Isaac's attention." She wiggled her eyebrows and giggled like a schoolgirl. "Or someone else's," I grumbled, and she rolled her eyes. "Alphas are very loyal to their mate. If you asked him for the world's biggest diamond, he'd search the world for it. He'll bring it back just for you." She sighed in contentment and grinned at me. "Hurry up and put it on. They will be arriving soon." I was hurried into the bathroom, and I yanked on the dress. I glanced at myself in the mirror before walking out. Annie gave me a nod of acceptance and led me down the stairs to the foyer, where Isaac was pacing back and forth between the stairs and the door. He looked up at me and froze. He almost seemed awestruck. I didn't buy it, though. He probably has some scheme in mind. I walked down the steps and linked arms with him. "Can we get this over with?" "I don't feel comfortable around so many people," I muttered, and he nodded. He took his arm from mine and wrapped it around my waist to bring me closer to his side. I felt uncomfortable standing next to Isaac, holding a glass of water in my hands, as I was surrounded by tall men and beautiful women. There seemed to be a group of 4 women who seemed very friendly with each other and seemed to be talking amongst themselves. Before long, someone tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned to look at a girl no older than myself. Her red hair was placed in a bun on top of her head, and her eyes were the greenest I have ever seen on anyone. "I'm Rose." She stuck her hand out towards me, and I looked up at Isaac. He seemed happy enough talking to some of the taller men of the group. I turned back to the redhead girl and shook her hand. "Lauren, do you want to go for a walk outside? I can tell this isn't really your thing." I nodded enthusiastically and looked up at Isaac. "I'm going outside with a Rose." He studied my face for a moment before nodding and pecking me on the cheek. "All right, don't go far." I nodded and left them to walk outside with Rose. It turns out Rose and I have a lot in common as we walked around the yard. She told me she was running away from her old pack when she came across Dallas, her mate. He seems like a nice man, but she ended every sentence about him with, and he's still a pain in the arse. I giggled every time. She seemed as quiet as I at times when she studied my posture and expression. So how's Isaac treating you? With all the times I've met him, he seems very demanding. Couldn't think of a better word myself. No, wait, I can. Deciding not to lie, I gave her the truth. She seems trustworthy enough. To be honest, mine and Isaac's relationship is very... I sighed and looked down at the glass of water in my hands. Complicated. Complicated? She asked, sitting down on a wooden bench and patting the seat next to her, indicating for me to sit down, which I happily obliged. I don't know what the gods were thinking when they matched Isaac and me together. He's all power and muscles, while I can't even lift a weight. She raised an eyebrow and leaned back on the wooden bench. That's what I used to think about Dallas. I used to hate him so much. I ran off once and got into some trouble with a rogue pack. Dallas, of course, saved me, and he didn't care if I was running away from him. All he cared about was that I was alive. Shows that he's not a bad guy. She smiled to herself, remembering the happy memory. I don't really think he'll come for me if I were attacked by rogues. He'll wait for me to turn into a wolf first. Rose frowned and scrunched up her face. Why? I haven't turned yet. Rose was silent for a moment before laughing. You haven't turned? My wolf was jumping around the moment I saw him. She grinned and moved her dress around on her lap. Can I tell you a secret? I asked her and she nodded. Go ahead. I'm good at keeping secrets. She grinned at me, and I looked down at my dress. I haven't changed into a wolf since I was 10 when I first changed. Rose was silent for a moment, thinking before she patted my knee. You've been denying your existence, she told me, and I shook my head. No. I mean, yes, but not on purpose. The first time I changed into a wolf, she went on a rampage. She was out of control, and I couldn't stop her. I let the tears fall at the memory. My body shook in anger at why I couldn't stop her, but I would never let her out. Ever. Chapter 10. Waking up the next morning to find Isaac there on his stomach and facing away from me seemed really odd. How the hell did he get into the bed? I would have noticed. This was the first time I had actually seen him without a shirt on. I would have always gone to sleep before he arrived, or he would have fallen asleep in his suit. Before I even realized, my hand was reaching over and tracing the marks on his back. The small scars told a story unknown to me, but very clear to him. Suddenly, he shifted, and I yanked my hand back. He settled down again, and I studied the small hairs that grew from his head. Although he may appear bald from a distance, his hair was just cut short and suited his personality perfectly. It was a dark color. Almost black, but very close to brown. I sighed and lay my head back down on the pillow. Perhaps staring at me is a bad idea. I heard him grumble and I froze. It seems to be turning me on. He rolled over and stared me directly in the eyes. As I started to move backwards, he growled and pulled me back towards him. My hands started to shove at his shoulders as I tried to escape. Let go of me, I begged, but his hand had moved down to my thigh and wrapped around my waist. You are my mate, he growled at me. I am your alpha, and you will respect me. The chocolate-colored eyes were quickly fading to black as I continued to struggle in his arms. He was now glaring at me, and he was suddenly throwing me back. He threw the covers back and stood up, looking at me. I clutched the blanket close to my chest as I saw his wolf trying to break free. His body was shaking, and he had only a single thread of control. Then it broke. Fur started to grow on his back, and he was collapsing onto his forepaws. His wolf was out of control, and he turned to me. The look in his eyes told me he was ready to kill, but it was quickly gone by something, and he threw back his head and howled before launching himself into the wooden door of the bedroom and running down the hall. Unwrapping myself from the sheets, I walked over to where the door would have stood. I saw Kent look around at the damage before turning his head to me. Are you all right? I nodded my head lightly before stepping over the destroyed door. Naomi waddled over to me and hugged me. "Are you okay?" she asked me, and I nodded. "What happened?" "He's so infuriating." My hands went to my head, and I groaned. I hate him," I told her, and her face softened. "You don't hate him, Dash." "I do. He's a jerk, and I want to go home." I traced the claw marks in the wall next to me, and Naomi rubbed my arm once more before letting me go and going to get changed. I left as well and grabbed some clothes out of the closet before heading into the bathroom to be somewhere more private. Putting the toilet cover down, I began to think. Perhaps I should just leave. Being here isn't really helping anything but getting me in more trouble and getting hurt by my own maid over and over again. I wrapped my arms around myself and rested my head on my knees in deep thought. I pulled on the clothes I had chosen and headed back inside the bedroom. The sound of grumbling maids already filled the corridor, and I looked to see what they were doing. Most of them were studying the damage while others tried to pick up the glass from the smashed pictures. I silently walked past them and down the stairs. My plan is to leave without being noticed by anyone. So far, so good. I jogged down the second set of stairs and towards the front door. Glancing behind me one more time to make sure I wasn't being followed, I stepped out into the open air and breathed a sigh of relief. Isaac's POV. My foot crashed down onto the tree, leaving a large dent in it, and I grabbed a stick from the ground before throwing it into the distance until it was out of my sight. I slumped down onto a nearby fallen log and groaned. The sound of footsteps made my head snap up to see Ken appearing from behind a large bush. "What is it?" I growled at him. "Is it rogues? If not, bug off." Ken sighed and shook his head before sitting down next to me. We sat in silence for a while before Kent cleared his throat and looked at me. "You really messed up," he told me, and I looked down at the floor. As if I don't already know that. We're just so different. I wanted an outgoing mate who was sexy and everything a man would want, but I got Lauren, who Dash. "Do you really think that you would get what you wanted?" He asked me, and I stared at him for a moment. Naomi was nothing like I wanted her to be. I wanted a quiet mate who can lash out when she's angry but will still be under my control. Mates are supposed to be the unexpected. "But we're so different," I muttered, and Kent rolled his eyes. "Perhaps so, but there's a reason why someone has put you guys together. You've got to find it and keep working at it until she sees that you are the perfect mate for her." He was right. I had to make it work somehow. He slapped my back before standing up. "We gotta get back. You need to help out the maids with cleaning up that mess upstairs and talk things out with your mate." I nodded my head and quickly changed before jogging back towards the house with my beta. I grabbed my spare clothes from under a bush and pulled them on before entering the house. My mate's scent filled the air like it did every day, but something was off about it. I grabbed a nearby maid's shoulder and turned her towards me. She looked up at me in shock. "Alpha, I Dash. Where is my mate?" I asked her, and she glanced around. "I'm not sure. When I last saw her, she was heading down here towards the front door." My eyes hardened, and something inside of me told me something bad was happening to my mate. "And you didn't stop her?" I growled, and she shook her head. "She is Luna after all. I mean, she can dash." I grabbed the girl by the neck, and she stopped in her rant. She began to choke as I lifted her off the floor and glared at her. I watched her hands claw at my hand, trying to loosen it, but she was unsuccessful. "You will learn that my mate does not leave this house without me." I threw her to the floor and turned to Kent, who had been watching the whole ordeal. "Summon every man, woman, and trained boy to scout the area for my mate. If she doesn't come back alive, then there will be consequences for everyone." He nodded his head and hurried off. A familiar scent filled my nose, and I turned to look at the old couple in front of me, also known as my parents. "What?" I snapped at them. "I think you're taking this a little too far, son." My father reached forward with his hand, and I stepped back. "Why would you care? Is it because I'm not fit enough for the role of Alpha, huh? Do you even care that my mate is out there and might even be hurt?" "Of course we care, Dash," my mother answered, and I cut her off with a glare. "Don't lie to me. Get out of my sight before I kill you both." They both looked at each other before walking off. I walked into my study and sank into the leather couch. It smelled like her, and I finally realized that I was completely alone. Like I always have been. Chapter 11. Lauren's POV. Clambering up a hill, I approached a dirt road. At the moment, it was abandoned and surrounded by my mate's woods. The sooner I get out of his territory, the better chance I have of not running into him. The sound of an alarmed howl came from behind me. It was off in the far distance, and I looked back over the large forest. Somehow, he must have figured I was gone and sent everyone on my trail. The dirt road stretched far into Isaac's territory on the right, and on the left, it began to lead into neutral grounds. Neutral ground is a dangerous place. It was mostly filled with rogues and lone wolves trying to find a female wolf who had just happened to wander into their land. Taking a deep breath, I started walking towards neutral ground. It was pretty deserted, but the sound of howls from the distance told me that I had to speed up or face my mate. Picking up my pace, I began to jog. The howling of the pack was getting louder and louder until it stopped. I stopped as well, unsure of why it had ceased. Glancing behind me, I saw no change. A gust of wind came past me and picked up the dust from the road, throwing it at me, making me cough and put a hand on my chest. The sound of a growl made me spin around to face a large wolf. He would never be as big as Isaac, but he sure was large. He was crouched down in an attack position and baring his yellow teeth at me. Something nudged me from behind, making me stumble forward and glance back. Another wolf had appeared behind me and was growling lowly. I had no other option but to walk forward as he forced me to. 3 other wolves appeared from the trees, but they were going at a faster pace than we were. The wolves were most likely leading me to a campsite. I clutched my arms around my chest and continued to walk towards the large figures that stood in front of me. One was a tall man, and he was grinning at me. Half of his face had been scarred and seemed unable to heal, even with his wolf. He was obviously bald, and the yellow color of his eyes told me everything. When a wolf turns rogue by choice, their eyes begin to turn yellow. It takes years, but this guy had obviously been a rogue for a long time. His eyes almost looked like they were decaying. "Hello, my pretty." He smelled like bad meat, and it was hard to contain the food in my stomach. His hand clamped onto my arm, causing me to cry out, and I tried to pull away. I watched as he rolled his eyes and placed duct tape over my mouth. "Screaming won't help here, dear. Here, you're ours." The men around me chuckled before he opened a wooden door in the floor and pushed me in. I stumbled down the stairs and collided with a concrete wall. He was quickly following me down and pushed me against the wall again. "You're going to stay here with all the other women to keep you company till the boss gets back. You understand?" I nodded my head, and something hard and cold clasped around my foot. He pulled off the tape, making me cry out and clutch my mouth in pain. The sound of his laugh as he left sent shivers down my spine. Then I was surrounded by darkness, and all I could hear was my labored breathing. My eyes began to adjust, and I could see 7 other figures around the room. I opened my mouth to speak when something touched my hand. I yanked it back and yelped. 2 eyes appeared from the darkness and stared at me. They reminded me of a deer. Big, round, and helpless. "Hey," she spoke. Her voice was soft and seemed to calm me a bit. "It's all right. Just calm down." She took my hand again, and I let her this time. My wolf could sense the danger around me, and my body started to heat up. The cold concrete floor was starting to feel nice, and once again, she was trying to break free from her cage. "Let me out, you stupid girl," she growled in my head. I could feel her throwing her body against the walls to try and get out, but I kept strong. "You can only wish," I muttered to her, and she howled. It made my head spin, and I leaned my head back against the cold wall. "Stupid girl. Let me out. We must return to our mate." I kept silent, deciding not to reply to her. It was best if I didn't let her free, even though she would be able to break the chains. She would ruin everything. I brought my knees up to my chest and hugged them tight. My eyes started to adjust to the darkness, and I could see the outline of the other girls in the room. Just as I was about to speak up, the basement doors swung open, and light poured into the room, burning my eyes. My gaze followed up the stairs to see a figure coming towards me. Isaac's POV. I launched myself into a nearby wolf, and he cried out. My teeth clamped onto his neck, and I threw him against a tree, where he curled up on the ground, still in his wolf form. My head snapped around to another tracker who was shoving his nose into the floor and sniffing. His nose nuzzled the wet leaves out of the way to try and find her scent. My wolf stalked over to him. "Find anything?" I asked him, and he looked up at me. "Yes, Alpha. There seems to be a trace going towards the edge of your territory." I froze and looked over to the high hills. Just beyond those hills were neutral grounds. My mate wouldn't be that reckless. My wolf was already moving before I could even think. He launched forward into a run. It would take a couple of hours to reach there, and my beta came up next to me. "Isaac, calm down. You can't go charging into neutral grounds without a plan. It would be a suicidal mission." My wolf began to slow as I took in his words. He was right. My beautiful mate lay just beyond my territory, and I would be stupid to charge in there without a second thought. Whose territory is on the other side of the neutral land? I asked my beta, and we slowed down into a steady jog. That would be Dominic's pack. "Contact him." I saw Kent roll his eyes and look at me from the corner of his eye. "That would be impossible, Isaac. You know our packs have conflicted for years now." "I don't care. When it comes to my mate, the arrogant alpha of another pack doesn't matter." Kent nodded his head and turned to jog back to the pack house. I stared at the large hills, studying them. "I'm coming for you, Lauren. I swear it on the last thing I do." Chapter 12. Dominic threw his feet up onto my desk and leaned back. "What's in it for me?" he asked, and I crossed my arms over my chest. "I have unmated females." He snorted and threw his hands behind his head. "I don't want your females. 10 of your most trained fighters will do." I growled lowly. "No, you are not getting any of my men. They're off limits." He shrugged his shoulders and slowly rose from his chair. "Fine then. I believe this meeting dash. I'll send trackers to search for your sister." I shot at him, and he stopped mid-stride. He turned to me, knowing that I had some of the best trackers available to wolf kind. "How many?" 10 at the least. "I'll even put some effort into it. I'll use all of my connections." His lips moved up into a smirk. "All right." He outstretched his left hand, and I grasped it in a shake. "It's a deal. I'll help you get your mate out of neutral lands and back to your side if you help me find my sister." I nodded my head but disapproved of his wording. If only it were that simple. "Shall we get started?" he suggested, and I nodded, grabbing a map. Unrolling it, it revealed a map of the land surrounding mine. "She's here," I told him, tracing the small amount of space between his land and mine. "I'll send some of my men to search our border to see if she has made it to our border." "I doubt it, though, Dominic." I couldn't put the right words to it. "The rogues have probably caught her. It would be very easy for her to escape if she changed into her wolf." I groaned and leaned against the table. Dominic raised an eyebrow. "She's human?" he asked, and I shook my head. Then he burst out laughing. My eyes snapped to his chuckling ones and glared. "Oh, of course, you would get the only wolf that doesn't turn." "Oh, this is priceless. What is she?" "Afraid of her wolf." Dominic slammed his hand on the table in hysterics, and I growled at him. "You dare make fun of my mate." My hand reached across the table and grabbed his throat. "She is my mate." He was still grinning at me, but his face was going an odd pale color. I finally dropped him, and he landed perfectly on 2 feet. He took a deep breath before letting it go back to normal, as nothing happened. "I suppose it's better than having no mate," he told me with a shrug. "You know, Isaac, you may be a jerk at times, but if your mate is as fragile as she seems to be, then you're lucky to have someone like that." I let out a sigh and shrugged. Sometimes it's hard. My wolf wants to see her so badly, but she refuses. Heck, my wolf even gets angry at her sometimes. It's so hard trying to please her and my wolf at the same time. "How do you think I'm managing being mateless?" he asked me, and I looked at him. "Not everyone is so lucky to actually have their mate." "I'm what?" 3 years older than you, and I've searched everywhere. I've even gone overseas to find her." His arms lifted and then dropped back to his sides. "The only place I haven't checked is the back of my freaking head. It was a lonely life not having a mate." His head bowed in defeat, and his curly hair flopped in front of his eyes. I sighed and looked back at the map. Let's get back to the task at hand, I told him, and he nodded. I'll send my wolves this way and make sure to hold them off so that you have time to get in there and find your mate, Dominic told me, and I nodded. I'll send the rest of them to attack the main base, which should be about here, I said, pointing to the area covered by the most forest. They probably have her hidden underground. Dominic nodded before looking up at me. Let's hope she's only suffering a few broken bones and not the worst. I looked up at him. She's not dead, I told him, and he shrugged. How do you know that? He asked, and I looked back at the map. Because the connection is still there. I can feel her panic, and right now it's killing me. Dominic nodded his head before studying the map. Shall we finish it there? He asked, and I nodded. I grabbed the map and began to roll it back up again. I shall discuss it with my beta. Contact me if there are any changes. I nodded and followed him out. His beta was standing there. Kent was talking to him quietly, and he nodded. They seemed to understand each other. Must be a beta thing. Dominic nodded to his red-headed beta, and I followed them to the forest out back. Dominic looked back at me. You have a nice pack here, Isaac. They seem to respect you very well. Thank you, Dominic. He shook my hand before taking off into the forest. I turned to my beta, and he raised an eyebrow at me. Anything good, Isaac? He asked, and I studied his face. Find out everything we know about Maria Tiran. Kent nodded and jogged back into the house. A promise is a promise after all. The figure was coming straight towards me. I watched as she scraped a chair across the floor and sat in front of me. She slowly sat down. Something was covering her face from me, and she let out a huff. Someone turn on the damn lights. Definitely a woman's voice. The light flickered on, and a hooded woman came into view. I squinted and moaned at the intensity of the light. Hello, Lauren. Her voice faded to a soft one. It was all too familiar, though. Her hand shot out and grabbed my chin. She inspected my face, and a dark grin appeared from the hood. Pretty like usual. Now, the quicker we get this done, the faster I can get out of here. She leaned back in the chair. You're Isaac's mate. Tell me something. What is his weak point? The question was strange, and the answer was totally unknown to me. Isaac doesn't have a weak padash. A hand came in contact with my cheek, and pain shot through my jaw. I yelped at the sudden impact. Don't lie to me, you stupid girl. I've been watching you for the past week. He's very protective of you. Probably has the whole pack on you. She smoothed my hair back from my face and pouted. Now just tell me what I want to know, and you can run back to your little mate. He's protective of his pack, I told her, thinking of the only thing that I had learned about him. Every alpha is, honey. No, I mean really protective. He knows everyone's names and has people inform him when children are born. She smirked. Children, huh? Too bad you're not pregnant. That would have changed things. My body shuffled back against the wall. And you, of course. She let out a high-pitched laugh, which made my ears hurt, and I winced. Now, little Lauren, tell me what happened to your arm. I glanced over at it and back to her. I banged into a tree while I was on a run with Isaac, I lied. Do you really expect me to believe that? I know that you don't change. What are you? Defective? Adopted? A runt. And no, I just don't change, I told her, and she smirked. She patted my cheek before standing up. And you call yourself an alpha's mate? I opened my mouth to shout something back, but something stopped me. Nick. Give her the dose. The man with the half-slashed face nodded and made his way towards me. He had a needle in one hand and my arm in the other. He was grinning widely at me. This will only hurt a lot, he told me, and pressed the needle into my arm, making me cry out. That should break you, he muttered before pulling it out and following his master up the stairs. As soon as he left, the waves of pain started. Chapter 13. I paced the border of my territory, becoming very impatient, when I heard a cough behind me. My head whipped around to see Kent there, folding a file. Isaac, I found some important stuff you should know about Maria. Glancing back at the border one more time, I made my way over to him. The report says that she was out for a run. Her trail led to the edge of Dominic's territory and then just stops. Like she suddenly didn't exist. And? I had already heard the report. Nothing interesting except that detail. So I was thinking that whoever took her injected her with something. Something to make her scent disappear. He watched my expression to see if nothing changed. What are you trying to say? I asked him, and he closed the files he had been looking at. I think these rogues are more dangerous than we first thought. They have drugs that can do things that shouldn't be possible. So, he stared at me. If my thoughts are correct, Alpha, then I think that Lauren is in more danger than we first thought. Not just the torture, but more. My hands flew up to my head, and I ran them through my hair. Gather all the warriors we have, dash. No, Alpha. He grabbed my arm as I turned away. Turning back to him, I saw the concern on his face. I think they may have more girls than just Lauren. I've been looking through files, and there are multiple cases like Maria's. If you don't mind me asking, but from the first road, he nodded towards the end of the dirt road and the neutral territory. Did you smell her scent? I shook my head and crossed my arms over my chest. So you're saying we should be more careful? I asked him. He shook his head. No, I'm saying that we should contact Dominic to tell him we need a different plan. Our plan is fine, I hissed at him, and he shook his head. No, it's not. Just listen to me, Isaac. If you charge into one place and don't know where they are exactly, then we've lost. We can't trace their scent, so we have to physically look. Fine, so what? We should line up Dominic's warriors along his borderline and ours around our border. Once someone has found them, they would be ready to charge in. I grabbed the nearest man I could find. Go get all of our men to line up along here. He nodded and quickly changed to run back. I turned to two other men who were with me. You too, I shouted at them, and they looked back at us. We're going scouting. The pain set in as soon as he left. My limbs felt like they were being pulled apart and then back together over and over again. I groaned as pain shot through my chest. Hey! Doe-Eyes kneeled beside me and placed a hand on my head. It's all right. Shoo. Just breathe, dash. Be quiet, I shouted at her, and she pulled back a bit. She growled lowly before leaning back in again. You've been injected with a drug which forces your wolf out of you. Once she gets out, she will be in full control, dash. She's not getting out, I managed to get out of my mouth. Well, she is. So you've got to calm down so you're at least conscious while she's out. No. I refused to let her dash, I screamed as pain entered my head. This is going to be really painful, so you have to trust me. You need to get your breathing back to normal. That will help. How the hell, dash? My arm suddenly felt like it was being pulled from its socket and replaced somewhere else. Just do it. I focused on my breathing. Okay, in and out. I squeezed my eyes shut and pushed myself into the wall as pain shot through my feet and towards my head. I could feel my heart going 10 times faster than normal, and pounding started to go through my ears. My mouth opened, and I let out a groan. I opened my eyes to just see Doe-Eyes being pushed away by someone else, and the lady kneeling down in front of me. Now, since this is your weakest state right now, you're going to tell me everything about Isaac now. I've told you everything, I gasped out, and she shifted slightly. I'll ask you again, and if you don't answer correctly, then I will inject you with something that will make the pain 10 times worse. There's nothing more to say, I cried out. He's possessive and loves his pack. Nothing more to say. She suddenly slapped me across the face and leaned in closer. Well, guess what? Your alpha mate is coming, and I'm ready for him and his little pack. She suddenly shoved my head against the wall hard, and I gasped in shock. Suddenly, pain ripped through my body again, and light entered my eyes. I clenched my eyes shut before opening them again to see the figure of a wolf. It lay on the ground like it had been waiting for someone. Its head suddenly lifted and stared right at me. That's when I knew who it was. It was my wolf. I crept slowly along the dead leaves. It was hard to be quiet when your feet could crush a twig or a bunch of leaves at once. At the moment, 3 other men and I were searching for my mate. The sound of boots against the dry leaves made me crouch low to the ground. A man suddenly appeared. He was a rogue. The color of his eyes told me he had been a rogue for at least a year now. They had the slightest tint. He shoved his hands into his jeans pockets and kept his head low. I would guess he would be no older than 18 at the most. My wolf started to slowly creep along behind him. My wolf had the right idea as always, and I glanced around quickly before focusing on the boy. The tops of tents suddenly came into view, and soon the whole campsite was visible. It was very rare to find camps like this. Rogues were individual characters and never liked to share. I watched him enter the camp with as much ease as a low rank would enter my office without permission. I raised my head and howled, signaling that I had found them, and started on my charge. Chapter 14. As Mavis's old maid approached, I couldn't help but feel that they needed some privacy. I didn't want to be a burden in their conversation, so I left to speak to Mabel, who was another friend of mine. She was a cousin to the king, but was extremely humble in comparison. She wanted to travel across the world, yet she'd never be able to experience her dream due to her own personal prison. The Alpha King would never let any of his family leave the castle. It was too risky. It was always too risky. Whilst talking to her, I noticed she looked quite uncomfortable. I didn't want to question it, though. It wasn't my place. I wasn't that close to her. Hearing shouting, we spun in Mavis's direction. Fury radiated off her. The boy, hunched over in regret as she served him the truth. I'd never seen her in this state. I didn't really know her, though. We'd become quite close during our daycare shifts, and I instantly knew she was talking to Ace. I didn't know he rejected her until now, but she had claimed him to be a traitor to her. The fact that he rejected her could lead him into huge trouble. Werewolves were supposed to accept their fate, their destiny, and defying that would be defying the Moon Goddess and the Alpha King. Deaths have been the result of rejection, either from execution or, sadly, tragic ends. Ace was being risky coming here. He must have known that Mavis would react like that. He must have done it to express his love, proving he wasn't scared of the consequences. Mavis carried on shouting, her voice getting croaky towards the end. Suddenly, all our heads snapped towards a voice. Now presenting His Royal Highness, Alpha King Mason. I turned my head to Mavis as his name was announced. Her eyes met mine in a nod of worry. She was worried for Ace, even if he had rejected her. She would always worry about Ace. A scent washed over me, capturing me instantly. The air created a comfort around me, but also made my body freeze. My eyes trailed around the room, trying to pinpoint the delicious smell. My eyes abruptly locked with piercing brown ones. My eyes shone with happiness. I had given up attempting to find my mate a year ago, as everyone had told me that he wasn't out there. He must have been dead. But here I was, proving them all wrong. His figure started to approach mine. I hadn't noticed the looks from others. Faces of shock, empathy, and glee. In an instant, our lips were locked. The kiss deepened further as we continued to be ignorant of our surroundings. The buzz that I felt went through my body, and I smiled through the kiss. I loved this. Soon, we stepped back. The brown eyes clouded with dark, intense desire. His rugged brown hair swayed as I smiled softly. I realized something in that moment. Alpha King Mason Lupus. Chapter 14. Lauren's POV. The fog around us made it hard to make out the shape of my wolf, but she was there. Her glowing black eyes were staring right into my soul, and it hurt. Lauren, she spoke. I'm sorry, Dash. Sorry for what? Killing those innocent humans? You're a monster. I watched as she shifted and moved closer towards me. Indeed, I am not the right wolf for you, but I am here. I chose you for a reason. Then tell me. She stayed quiet, and I huffed. My arms wrapped over my chest, and I leaned onto my right leg. That's what I thought. Maybe figuring it out for yourself will help. I glared at her. Her eyes dropped to the ground, and she shifted on her feet. I'm here to tell you that I'm not coming out. I laughed sarcastically. Yes, and you begging me to let you out for the month was just a test. No, I'm not coming out because it will be forced. I will not let those rogues get to you, Lauren. They don't deserve to see me. I snorted. No one wants to see you anyway. She growled, and her white teeth flashed against the light. One day, Lauren, you'll realize how fortunate you are to have me as your wolf, and not some weak wolf like your sister. Her wolf is a stupid Barbie doll. My sister's wolf is fine. She doesn't kill anyone, unlike you. The black eyes suddenly went hard and sharp claws were aiming for my throat. I could hear my scream echo through the room, and someone grabbed my shoulders. My body hurt, and I groaned at the touch. Hey, it's all right. My eyes slid closed for a moment before someone shook me and banged me against the wall to try and wake me. Now is not the time to sleep, little one. I must help you out. I opened my eyes to stare into gray ones. The tint of amusement which sparkled in them told me that he wasn't here to hurt me, but my bones were screaming out at me not to move. Come on. I'll help you up. He wrapped an arm under mine, and I screamed in pain. He quickly dropped the idea and studied my face. His arms slid under my knees and around my back. My body screamed out again, and everything hurt. It's all right. I'll bring you across the border dash. He was suddenly shoved forward, and he stumbled, nearly making me crash into the ground. The loud growls around me told me there was a large fight, but my eyes were now closed in pain. She'll die in a matter of minutes, Dominic. Her wolf is ripping her to shreds from the inside. No one is dying on my watch except you. I was suddenly laid on the floor, and I let out a groan in pain. The leaves next to me scraped very close to my head, knowing that someone's hind legs were close to my head. Okay, Lauren, come on, you have to get out of here. Let me help you. My wolf answered and sighed. Just let me guide you back to our territory. I nodded my head to her, and I could suddenly feel her thinking. First, open your eyes. You're going to need all of your senses to get out of this mess. My eyes opened, and I stared around for a moment. The sky was barely seen because of the tree's large leaves. Roll to your left. I did so, and a wolf landed where I used to lie. I watched the brown character shake its fur and launch itself at the nearest action. Your muscles are fragile due to the failed change. So you're going to crawl. Get going or you're going to get squashed. I clenched my eyes shut and then began to crawl across the ground. The wolves around me were attacking each other with such strength that even I wouldn't be able to handle it. If only Isaac were here right now. He's not here, but I am. He's close, though. I can feel his wolf. I groaned and leaned against the nearest tree, trying to catch my breath. Move. A voice shouted in my head. I quickly twisted my body to get out of the way of a wolf. It was thrown into the tree, leaving a massive dent in it. The wolf shook its dark brown head and glanced at me. The instant he looked at me, I knew who it was. It was Kent. As soon as he was there, he was gone. Get to your feet. My wolf growled at me, and I groaned in frustration. I can't. Do it now. I pulled myself to my feet and was able to gain some strength to start walking. Making sure the trees made me stable enough to walk, I glanced around. The fighting was taking place throughout the forest. Two wolves rushed past, snapping at each other's heels in anger. My breathing was much faster than normal, and I managed to finally push myself off the tree and stumble towards the next. Run. My wolf told me, and I sighed. Run. Now, Lauren. The urgency in her voice told me I had to get moving. I stumbled with the first step, and my legs screamed out at me to stop. My legs found a steady pace, but my wolf was begging me to go faster. Without being in my actual wolf form, I was much slower. Someone shoved me from behind, and I fell forward. I turned over to see a large female wolf. She growled at me and snapped her teeth at me. I lifted my arms to my face, trying to protect myself from her jaws. Suddenly, her weight was lifted off me, and I glanced over to see a wolf I remember very clearly taking her down. Now you can have your Isaac. I sighed happily as he ripped at the female, and she let out howls of pain. My head fell back onto the leaves in relief, and a wolf appeared above me. The wet nose nuzzled at my neck, and I clutched his neck. Isaac, I muttered, and he whimpered softly. I'm tired, I told him, and he was soon turning back into his human form. Lauren, he murmured before glancing up and down my body. I saw him cringe slightly before cupping my cheek. Don't fall asleep just yet. I want you to see a doctor. No, I moaned out, trying to push him away. I'm fine. Lauren dash. I just want to go home and sleep. Lauren, I'm so sorry, he whimpered out. I'm so stupid. Everything I've done. I watched as he shook his head and gently picked me up. His eyes looked at me as if I were a fragile piece of glass, which could break at any moment. My lips lifted into a smile, and I let my eyes close. Isaac's POV. The pack of rogues was quickly alerted and changed into their wolves. As soon as I took a step forward, I could already hear the rest of my pack charging in. It wasn't hard to see them rush past me and into the pack of rogues. I broke into a run and weaved through the tents which had been set up. I launched myself at the rogue who was attacking one of the younger warriors and quickly cut through the thick fur in his neck and through his major vein located there. Dominic's pack had arrived sooner than I realized, and Dominic was heading over to me. He nodded to me to keep on the outside while he searched for my mate. I gave him a hard stare before nodding and heading out of the battle. I circled the battle, trying to herd them further inwards. Those that did escape were being chased and quickly attacked by another wolf. A large wolf headed straight for me in a rampage, and I took him head-on. We rose onto our back legs to get better access to the weak parts of the wolf's body, and I had a good head start. My claws slashed at his stomach while he aimed for my shoulders, trying to coax me down onto the floor. My jaw locked onto his neck, dragging him down. I quickly killed him and launched myself at the nearby escaping rogue. He wasn't so hard to take down with his smaller structure and weak muscles. He was easy to take down. Isaac. A voice called into my head. I just saw Lauren. She's heading back towards the territory, and she looks badly hurt. I growled and thanked Kent for his information and began to head back towards my territory. My nose went to the floor, making sure she had not passed by already. I picked up a faint trace in the wind coming from the fight, and I began to make my way closer towards it. Then, like she was an angel that had appeared out of nowhere. My wolf wanted to howl in triumph, but my dream was quickly smashed when another wolf launched themselves onto her. They attacked her, and I growled loudly before launching myself into her body. I threw her onto the ground and glared at her. I began to rip her limb from limb for hurting my mate until there was nothing left of her. I made my way back to my mate and nuzzled her with my nose. She latched onto my neck like it was instinct, and I smiled happily. I quickly changed back into human so I could talk to her. Isaac, she muttered. I could barely hear her, even with my sensitive hearing. I'm tired. I glanced up and down her body, inspecting the damage done to her. Lauren, I muttered, seeing the massive slashes in her legs and stomach, worried me a lot. Don't fall asleep just yet. I want you to see a doctor. I placed a hand on her cheek and I gave her eye contact. No, she moaned and tried to push me away. I'm fine. Stubborn girl. Lauren dash. She cut me off quickly. I just want to go home and sleep. I sighed. Of course she does. She must be so tired. I'm so sorry, Lauren, I whimpered out to her. I'm so stupid. Everything I've done. I couldn't say anymore. Everything that has happened is my fault. I never want my Lauren to go anywhere ever again. She's mine. I gently lifted her, afraid I would hurt her further, and she finally relaxed. I watched her close her eyes, and I so badly wanted to tell her to open them, but when I saw a smile lift onto her lips, my heart jumped several beats, and my heart went into my throat. She truly was the most beautiful woman ever. Chapter 15. Isaac's POV. I ran my hand over my head and sat down in the small chair outside my mate's hospital room. I had yet to see if she was okay, and tension was building between me and everyone outside. The door opened quietly and shut behind the doctor. He stood in front of me and wrote something on his clipboard. She's fine, he told me. She only has a broken leg and a dislocated left shoulder, but that was expected. May I see her? I asked him, and he looked at me. I advised that no one see her. Her wolf is still very active, and I don't know whether she is lethal or not dash. She would not hurt me. I am her mate, I told him sternly, and he took a step back. You are the alpha. If you want to go in there, you may. I cannot stop you. He bowed his head and turned to walk away. I let out a deep breath and got up from the seat. Isaac, a voice called, followed by loud footsteps. Dominic came into view and tried to catch his breath as he leaned against the door frame. I must discuss something with you. We have the girls from Dash. Take them. They are not needed here, Dash. No. One is demanding that she stay here with you and Lauren. I growled lowly before turning around and following towards the small living room where the girls had been gathered and cared for. I studied the small crowd of girls. They must be between the ages of 16 and 22. What monsters these rogues were. Alexis would like to join your pack. She has made a special connection with your mate while in the basement. Please, Alexis, tell him the information that you told me and why you would like to stay. A girl with dark brown hair looked up at me. She had caramel-colored skin, and her brown eyes were wide with fear. She reminded me of Lauren when I first made eye contact with her. My beautiful Lauren. A small grin appeared on my lips, and I quickly shook it away before crossing my arms over my chest. Alexis, tell Alpha Isaac what you told me, Dominic urged. Alexis took a deep breath and opened her mouth. The rogues who had trapped us down in the basement have come up with this remedy, which you inject into a wolf, which forces it not turn or forces it to turn. They injected Lauren with it, and she was forced to turn. You saw her wolf? I asked in curiosity. What did she look like? Lauren did not turn. Her wolf actually denied the change and kept herself locked in. It was interesting to watch. Her eyes went red and, she fought against it. I, unfortunately, can never change again. They injected the girls here with it, and it somehow killed their wolves. Kill a werewolf's wolf. I ran a hand up my cheek and got lost in thought until someone shook my shoulder. Isaac. May she stay? She has some useful information for you. I looked at the girl. Her eyes pleaded with me to stay, and I nodded. She may stay. She instantly bowed and thanked me. A thought struck me. Who is that woman that kept you there? Alexis looked up and shrugged. I don't know, Alpha. I never saw her face. No one did. A maid walked past, and I quickly grabbed her arm. Take this girl to the second floor and give her one of the spare bedrooms. She will not be working in the kitchen or be a maid. I turned to Alexis. Do you like children? She nodded her head. At my old pack, I was a nanny dash. Perfect. Settle her in and make sure no one even thinks about harming her verbally or physically, or I will deal with them myself. The maid nodded and quickly bowed her head to me. Alexis quickly followed behind the maid as she began to walk towards the stairs. I turned to Dominic. Would you like to bring this discussion into my office? I think that would be best, he told me and headed towards my office. As I closed the door, I could already see Dominic take a look at the files on my desk. Anything, he asked me, and I shook my head. She's either dead or turned rogue. She wouldn't turn rogue. He shook his head at the thought. She wouldn't do that. Every trace of her was wiped off the land. The same thing they did to Lauren. Maria may have been Dash. No, Dominic interrupted. She would not have been working with rogues. That is like a sin. She wouldn't have. This is only one possibility, Dominic. It doesn't mean that she was. Dominic turned and glared at me. I would like you to stop looking for my sister. You are making assumptions which are not and will not ever be true. No one wants to hear that their sister is turned rogue, but it is something that often happens. However, it was rare for a girl with alpha blood to disappear. If you want me to stop the search, Dash. Yes. I broke the deal. I don't want to look into anything involving my family. I shrugged my shoulders, and he turned to leave. Have a great time with your petty little mate. He spat and left. I could only roll my eyes at the stupid tone of his voice. Lauren's POV. I woke up to the sound of beeping. My eyes opened and quickly closed once a blinding light pressed against them. Throwing my hand over them, I groaned loudly, and the door opened. Good morning, Luna. How are you? I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I quickly shut it again, and the nurse smiled at me. It's okay. You don't have to speak. We gave you a lot of painkillers, so if you feel a bit groggy, then that's why. She patted my left hand and smoothed her dark brown hair behind her left ear. Well, Lauren, you've gone through quite a lot. You've dislocated your shoulder and broken your leg. They should heal properly in the next couple of days. So that's the good news. Isaac said he'll see you in the next couple of hours since he's in a meeting with Dominic. She looked down at her clipboard and took my temperature and everything. Everything seems to be okay. I reckon you can leave today, but I'll put you on bed rest. So no running around. She winked at me and rested her hand on my head. Okay, let me just help you out of these wires. She began to unhook me from the machines around me, and I flinched at everyone. It's all right, she soothed. Almost done. She pulled the last one off my finger and smiled at me. There you go. All done. I'll get you some proper clothes. I looked down at myself to see my leg in a cast propped up on a pillow, and my body was covered in a thin hospital gown. I blushed and tried to hide my face in the most ridiculous way by covering it with my arms. She chuckled and quickly left the room. As I waited, there was a knock on the door and Isaac poked his head in. He looked at me and smiled. Hello, mate. I shuffled back on the bed. There was no trust in him, even though he did save my life. It's all right, mate. I will not harm you. Did he forget my name or something? He sat down in the chair next to me, and I stared at him. I'm here to make a promise to you, he told me before taking my hand. I will never, and I mean never, hurt you again. What I did, you didn't deserve, and I didn't know what came over me. Perhaps it was just pure arrogance or annoyance that you were not what I had dreamed of in a mate. No, you are much more than I could ever dream of. He placed a piece of hair behind my ear and smiled. Your innocent mind is so perfect, and the fact that no one else has ever seen your body seems to excite me. Just know that I am never going to hurt you in any way again, Dash. The door opened and the nurse came back in. Good morning, Alpha, she sang and placed the clothes on my bed. Here you go, Luna. These are for you. I must discuss some things with your mate before you leave. I nodded, and Isaac glanced at me one more time before leaving. I let out a sigh and began awkwardly pulling on the clothes and finally swinging my legs over the side of the bed. The cast was really heavy on my leg, and it sank to the floor straight away. Thank you, Iris. I will take care of her. Isaac saw me trying to get up and stared at me for a moment. What are you doing? Let me help you. He came towards me, and I shuffled back. Don't touch me, I told him, and he frowned. But mate Dash, you have not earned my trust. Leave me alone. I want to help you to your feet and Dash. Don't touch me, I hissed at him, and I brought myself to my feet. I could hear his faint whimper and him take a few steps back. I limped towards the door and moved myself around the big piece of meat. Chapter 16. The sun streaming in through the window pushed against my eyelids until I was forced to open them. Isaac was already moving around the room. He was busy looking through drawers and the large closet. I sighed and pulled the blanket up to my chin. He must have heard me and swiveled around to face me. You're awake. He seemed excited by the fact, and I turned away from him. I flinched as I rolled onto my injured shoulder. Lauren. You must wake up, he told me, lightly touching my shoulder as if he might break me. We're having a pack meeting to formally introduce you and to show everyone that their alpha female is okay. I shook my head at the thought of standing in front of a large crowd and having every set of eyes staring at me. Lauren, please. This is important. You may sleep later. I'm supposed to be on bed rest, I told him, and he stayed silent for a moment before speaking again. You will only be out of bed for a couple of hours. It will not harm you. What if they hated me, though? They must think so many bad things about me already. I ran away from them like a rogue. Please, Lauren. Don't make me carry you down there in your pajamas. A laugh slipped past my lips, and I slowly sat up. His eyes lit up instantly, and he grabbed the dress from the end of the bed. Here. It's my sister's. She said you could borrow it. I took it from his hands and stared at him. He stood there studying me before realizing why I was staring at him. Oh, right. Yes, of course. He grinned before slipping outside. I slipped my legs over the side of the bed and stood up, leaning onto my uninjured leg as I pulled off my pajamas and changed into the dress. I limped over to the door and pulled it open to see Isaac chatting to Kent. And everyone is downstairs? Kent nodded his head and looked over Isaac's shoulder at me. Yes, Alpha. Your mate is waiting for you. Isaac quickly turned around to look at me and smiled. Beautiful, he murmured before walking towards me and wrapping an arm around my waist. The pack has been waiting to formally meet you, my mate. He led me forward as I quietly limped at his side. I could tell he was trying to make me put most of my weight onto him so that I wasn't in pain, but I didn't even want to be touching him, let alone lean on him. The sound of talking was getting louder the closer we got towards the foyer. "Everyone is in the garden, Lauren. Don't worry." We came to the stairs, and he lightly lifted me towards him so I wasn't putting weight on my injured leg. He set me down on the floor before inspecting me carefully, then led me towards the back door. My breathing had gotten faster, and I could hear my heart beating in my ears. "Lauren." Isaac had stopped walking and turned to me. "Calm down. No one is going to hurt you, or they'll have me to answer to, okay?" I took a step back from him as he went to grab my arms. "Just don't touch me," I told him. I could see his wolf begin to whimper in his eyes. Isaac's face fell, and he nodded in defeat. He lowered his head and headed towards the back doors. I limped after him and flinched as I stopped next to him. His arm slipped around my waist again, and he put on an emotionless face. As he moved outside, the crowd began to quiet down until there was just silence as he sat me down in a chair. Isaac turned back to his pack and stepped up to the microphone that was perched in the middle of the small stage. "Good morning, and thank you all for coming on such short notice. Now, I am here to formally introduce your new Luna and to thank all of you for letting your mates save her. We are also to discuss the newfound alliance we have enforced with the neighboring pack." He cleared his throat and held out his hand towards me. "Now, enough about that. I will let my new mate speak." I froze in my chair as he walked towards me. He slowly helped me to my feet. "Come on, Lauren. Just say a few words," he whispered to me, and I swallowed the lump in my throat. I was standing in front of hundreds of people, with them all staring at me. Some eyes were excited, others weren't pleased with what they saw, and some were impatient for me to start talking. I leaned forward a bit and opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I closed it again and then opened it. My cheeks started to flush as I thought of what they must be seeing. Someone who looked like a goldfish and not Luna's potential. I glanced over my shoulder to see Isaac staring at something in the distance and frowning. My eyes flew to the crowd, and I began to search it for a familiar face. Suddenly, someone was putting their hand on my shoulder and speaking into the microphone. What Lauren is trying to say is that she's happy to be part of this pack. She just can't put it into the right words. I nodded my head and glanced over the audience. Isaac suddenly pushed me aside from the microphone and glared at his mother. "That would be correct. Thank you, Mother. I need to discuss the matter of Dominic's pack." His mother nodded at her son and left the stage. Isaac turned back towards his pack and stroked the side of his cheek. "Dominic's pack is completely off limits. The alliance has failed, and if I find any of you crossing into neutral territory, it will be counted as treason and result in exile. Or, if it seems like you have been allied with the rogues, then death. That is all." The crowd quickly gathered itself as Isaac started to walk off the stage, dragging me along with him. When we were off, and the crowd had begun to grow louder, he turned me to face him. "What was that?" I dash. "You completely embarrassed me in front of the whole pack. I needed them to accept you, and yet you just showed them that you are not fit for the role of Luna. A courageous wolf. Well then, maybe I am not fit for the role, dash." "No," he barked at me. "No, you are my mate, and as my mate, you will become Luna." I yanked my hand from his grip and looked up to give him eye contact. "You are way off from making me trust you. You're only making me hate dash." His hand covered my mouth. "You will not discuss personal matters while in public. Understood?" I didn't have time to reply because he was suddenly pushing me through the crowd. I looked up at his face as his jaw tightened and he placed his hand on the small of my back. "Now listen closely, little mate," he whispered into my ear. "I may be harsh and cruel, but some things we do not discuss in public, such as relationship problems." He guided me into the quiet woods and kept walking me forward. "Why?" "Because it makes them believe we are the perfect couple. That we will help them in times of need and be here." He suddenly turned me around and forced me to sit on a log. "A pack needs 2 leaders, and now that I have my Luna, I need everyone to know that they are no longer in harm's way. They now know that they have someone who looks upon their children's health and well-being." He cleared his throat and sank onto one knee. "And I know you hate me, but would you rather our pack be hopeless and think that their own alphas are putting them in danger? I know the women don't trust me in a way that they would trust their Luna, so just think about that when I ask you." Would you really leave a whole pack of people who are ready to accept you unconditionally? He cleared his throat again and looked me square in the eyes. His eyes begged me to do something I couldn't see. I watched as he reached behind him and took something from his back pocket before turning back to me with a small ring box in hand. So Lauren, because we are meant for each other, and I can't think of anyone I could trust with the safety of my pack. He struggled to take his next breath, but he looked me in the eyes again, and I knew exactly what he was going to ask. Will you marry me? Chapter 17. My eyes shifted down to the small ring in the dark blue box. It was covered in small diamonds and looked more expensive than anything I had ever seen. I quickly looked up at his face to see if he was still waiting for an answer. His face was changing from hopeful to losing it pretty quickly. I don't know, I mumbled, but he quickly grabbed my left hand. I understand that we haven't known each other for very long, and we hardly know each other, but this is an opportunity of a lifetime. It shows that I will always be faithful to you and that. He began to drift off into his own thoughts before I touched the box softly with my free hand. I'm sorry, Isaac. He looked up at me, and I saw his left eye twitch. Perhaps in the future. We're still young, and we have a lot of time for this. Why rush? I wouldn't expect you to understand anyway. I watched as he slowly stood up and brushed the dirt from his pants. You weren't born into the role. My lips slowly formed a frown, and I stood up as well. Wasn't I born your mate, Isaac? He studied me for a moment before turning around and heading back towards the house. You know, Isaac, I've noticed something about you. You fight everything except me. You tend to ignore me, and you give up the fight. No, you're my mate. Unfortunately for you, Lauren, there is a difference. I have changed my ways, and I won't fight with you anymore. He slowly started to walk back to the house with me on his tail. I studied the muscles under his shirt, bunching up and then relaxing with such elegance that I hadn't seen before. Kent, Isaac called out, and Kent stood up from where he was sitting. Let's train, he said, pulling off his shirt and handing it to me. I took a step back at the impact, and Kent grinned. Sure thing, Alpha. I watched as he pulled off his shirt and handed it to Naomi, who was staring at him in disgust. As they jogged off towards the yard, I slowly headed over to Naomi. She was flattening Kent's shirt and sighing. As I took a seat next to her, she spoke. Doesn't it get annoying how they just leave you here by yourself? I shrugged. I prefer to be away from him. He's so. Naomi suddenly took a sharp intake of breath and clutched her stomach. You okay? I asked her and she nodded. Yeah, I'm... She let out a groan of pain and grabbed my shoulder. Get me to the pack, doctor. I think the baby is coming. I nodded and quickly helped her to her feet. I continued to bite my lip as I waited for a response from the doctor. Isaac had already gone to his office a few hours ago and left me here to wait alone, but told me to get him as soon as I heard anything. As I pulled my legs up onto the chair, Kent came out looking really red. He glanced around the hall before his eyes fell onto me. I don't want to be away from her for long. Tell the Alpha that it was a boy named Delos. A smile grew on my face and I nodded. When he disappeared back into the room, I began my way to Isaac's office. Knocking quietly, I slowly opened the large wooden doors. Isaac was hunched over his desk, engrossed in his paperwork. I was starting to feel really bad for him and how much work he had to put in. Isaac, I said quietly, picking at the ends of my sleeves. He grunted but didn't look up at me. It was a boy, I told him. He stopped for a moment before looking up at me. A boy. I nodded my head, and he nodded his in acceptance. What's his name? Delos. They named him Delos. Isaac smiled. After Kent's dad. He shook his head and put his head back down. I slowly lowered my head and began to leave. Did I say you could leave? He told me, and I looked over my shoulder. But Come here. I glanced around the room before making my way towards him. He produced the same box from earlier, and I sighed. As I opened my mouth to speak, he interrupted me. Before you even say it, can you just take it? It's burning a hole in the back of our wardrobe, just sitting there. So please just take it. Isaac. Please, Lauren. Just take it. I can't stand looking at it anymore. I nodded before taking it off the table. I also must ask you not to tell anyone. As it was a private matter, it will stay a private matter. I lowered my head and mumbled a yes. You can go now. As I turned to leave again, Isaac shouted to me. Oh, and Lauren? Perhaps we will be there for our first child. I don't think it would be an event I want to miss. A smile tugged at the ends of my mouth, and I nodded before finally leaving the room. Perhaps he is changing. Running my hands over the top of my head, I sighed lightly. Oh, Lauren, what did I do to deserve such a big rejection? I almost laughed at myself for being so stupid. Of course, she would hate me. I basically took away her home and family just so I could have her to myself. There was a sharp knock on the door, and one of my patrolmen stepped in. Alpha, we've come across a trace of something and an urgent call from Dominic. The rogues have been attacking their scouts and are gaining great numbers. I leaned back in my chair and looked at him. He shifted from one foot to the other uneasily. What would you like us to do? I ran my hand over my cheek and groaned. Send our men over to help them, but be careful about it. He nodded and bowed his head before he left. Staring at the door for a few seconds, I was considering the safety of my own pack when I heard a loud scream from somewhere. I jumped to my feet. Taking long strides, I headed out the back of the house to find one of the scout groups badly injured and collapsed on the floor. Pushing my way through the crowd that had formed around him, I crouched down next to his mate. Jackson. His face lifted up towards me. Who did this to you? A faint reply happened through our pack link. Rogues. I turned towards the nearest person and grabbed their arm. It was a young boy in his early teens. Get the pack doctor and be quick about it, boy. He nodded and raced off to find the pack doctor. I stood up and glanced around. Everyone in the pack house. I'm taking this to Zone 1. No one leaves or comes out. I looked back down at the wounded wolf whimpering to his mate, and I crouched down again. It's all right, Jackson. The doctor is coming. Everything is fine. Someone knelt beside me, and I glanced over to the doctor. I'll take your mate to a safe place. It's okay. You can trust me with her. He nodded weakly and closed his eyes as he shifted back into his human form painfully. I stood up and looked towards his weeping mate. Paula. She looked up at me. Come with me. I'll take you to the West Wing, where they'll be taking him. She nodded and stood up. I'll only be inside, Jackson. She kissed his lips before walking towards the house. As I walked through the crowd of people, I saw Lauren walking down the stairs. She made eye contact with me, and as if she knew what I was saying, she turned and raced back up the stairs. Chapter 18. Lauren's POV. I heard footsteps follow me as I made my way into my bedroom, and the door shut tightly behind me. As I took a seat on the bed, my eyes lifted up to Isaac's. He was studying me carefully before he spoke. There's been a rogue attack. I breathed in and nodded my head before standing up. What do you want me to do? His head tilted to the side, and a small smile appeared on his lips. Now you sound like a Luna, he told me, and I blushed. He cleared his throat, just realizing what he said. Right, I need you to go downstairs and help me calm the pack. Okay, I can do that. I rubbed my sweaty hands on my legs and started to move towards the door. You have to talk to them, Lauren. You can't freeze up as you did earlier. His voice was very serious as he came up next to me. I won't. Although I'm not good at public speaking, I'll be fine now. I can sort of feel it. I looked up at him as he nodded his head. My mind was suddenly lost in thought. What do I say to them? The pack is under attack. Everyone run for your lives. Now, that would be stupid. Don't worry. Everything's fine. Not very convincing. Even I would still be screaming on the inside and out. There's a rogue dash. What the heck? Something warm had slipped around my hand and laced through my fingers. I looked down at my hand to see another hand clasped around mine. My eyes followed the arm to see Isaac clenching and unclenching his jaw. What are you doing? I asked him, and he looked at me. What a good mate should do. Holding my hand? I asked him, and he nodded. It's a symbol of care, and I care about you. I blinked at him before turning my head back towards where I was walking. Where is this all coming from? I asked him, and I could hear him take a sharp intake of breath. I'm worried about you, Lauren. I don't want to lose you again. Do you know how much it hurt for me to stay here without you? He suddenly tugged me to a stop and turned me towards him. Lauren, listen to me. I'm sorry about everything I've done. I'm sorry that I hurt you in ways which I will never do again. His hand smoothed over the arm he dislocated, and he sighed. I don't know what was going through my head. It must have been something stupid because I can't even remember. Alpha, the pack is getting restless. They want to know what's going on. Kent interrupted us and both of our heads snapped to him. He suddenly looked awkward standing there, realizing he interrupted something. Thank you, Kent. Kent bowed his head and scurried away. I couldn't help but smirk. Why does he call you Alpha if he's your best friend? I asked him, and Isaac looked down at me. He likes to keep the respect towards me high. Come on. He suddenly let go of my hand, and the warmth was gone. My body was already craving to get it back, but my mind kept it in check. As we rounded onto the stairs, the crowd suddenly got louder and louder, shouting questions at us, and Isaac looked over the crowd. He suddenly leaned down to my ear so I could hear him. Just stay calm, okay? They're just nervous. I nodded and started to wring my hands together. His hand suddenly came down on mine, and he looked at me with caring eyes. His hand slipped back around mine for comfort, and he turned back to the crowd. As he held up his hand, the crowd was silenced. It is true. There is a rogue attack on us. There were sudden gasps among the crowd and mutters. But we will not let that affect us. Although there is a rogue attack on us, I will not let them harm you. You are my pack, and you will always stay safe. The pack was silent again. Therefore, I am opening the pack house for your refuge. I am sorry to say, but anywhere outside of the pack house is dangerous. I am sending our best warriors to fight the disgusting beasts. There was a loud cry of acceptance from the crowd, and Isaac turned to me. Lauren. I searched his eyes for something, anything that was telling me that I had to speak, but there was nothing, just a request. I stepped forward and cleared my throat a little bit. Hi. Oh God, that sounded stupid. The crowd was silent save for only a few coughs and a sneeze. As you know, my name is Lauren, and I'm your Luna. I sighed and looked at Isaac. He nodded, telling me to go on. I turned back to the crowd. I understand if you don't think I'm fit for the job, as for my appearance earlier. I'm not a very confident person and not someone for public speaking. I laughed awkwardly and sucked in another breath. But from the time I've spent here, I know you have a great pack and a great leader. I just hope you can accept me as much as you can accept me as my mate did. I almost laughed, but I kept it in. Suddenly, they were clapping, and I looked at Isaac again. He was smiling at me and squeezed my hand. Then he suddenly pulled me into a hug, and I was squashed against his chest. I knew they would accept you, Lauren. This is your pack now, he whispered to me. Our pack. I coughed as I struggled to breathe. Once again, I was ruining a great moment. Can't breathe. I struggled to get out, and he finally let go and smiled at me. Isaac turned back to the crowd and smiled. You may now take your leave. Explore the house. The West Wing is now open to everyone. The West Wing. I frowned and looked up at him. The West Wing. I spoke in a quiet voice, and he looked down at me. It's where all the spare bedrooms are. When the whole pack lived together, they used to live on the west side of the house while all the warriors and high-ranking males lived on the east side of the house, but much has changed now. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders. Come. I'll show it to you. The state of the West Wing was very well maintained. Although it hadn't been used in at least 100 years or so, the space seemed to be very well kept, and not a speck of dust covered the room as the pack started to fill the bedrooms up the stairs. Are they going to be okay? I asked Isaac, and he nodded easily. The West Wing is the most guarded spot of the castle. It normally has the most protection, and there is no way anyone is going to be able to get in here and harm anyone. He wrapped an arm around my waist and guided me towards the stairs. Let's get our pack settled before having lunch. He told me, and as instantly as he said lunch, my stomach rumbled, and he chuckled. I hope you can fend it off from eating anyone, he joked, and I blushed as my stomach rumbled again, and I pushed his side a little. Shut up. It's not my fault you've been feeding me like a spoiled dog for the past few weeks, and now I'm fat. Suddenly, he stopped me and turned me around to face him. "You're not fat," he told me, holding my cheek in his hand. "You are perfect in every way imaginable." I pushed his hand away and smiled up at him. "Thank you, but dash." "Alpha," a young teenage boy shouted out. He was limping a bit, and he had a scar across half his face. He looked like he had taken quite a beating, too. He finally came to a stop in front of us and panted before sucking in a deep breath and giving us a smile. "Alpha, I was wondering if I could start training." "Ryan, you know how your parents feel about you, dash." "I'm 16. I should have started my basic fight years ago. I feel useless just because of my leg. It's not even that bad. I can run. I can balance fine on it and dash." "Ryan." Isaac placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. "You also know how I feel about you in combat. I cannot risk your life because you want to fight. I can only take in the ones who have the physical and mental standards." Ryan's face fell, and so did the rest of his body. I bit my lip and instantly reached out for his hand. "Ryan, is it?" I asked him, and he looked up at me. He nodded his head weakly, and I smiled at him. "I know how hard it is not to be able to dash." "How would you know?" he grunted out. "You don't have to protect your future, mate." His eyes glistened in annoyance and anger, making me sigh and pat his hand. "Perhaps we could talk about it over lunch somewhere more private." He frowned. "Huh." "Don't act so surprised," I said, giving him a little hit to the shoulder. "I'm only asking you to lunch." "But dash." "I advise you take your Luna's request, Ryan," Isaac growled out, and I turned to glare at him. "It's not a command, Isaac. Don't make him come because dash." "I'll come," Ryan suddenly squeaked out, and I turned to him. "You don't have to," I told him. "Just because my mate said so doesn't mean dash." "No, it's okay. The Alpha's dining room, right? I'll meet you there." He suddenly hobbled off into the crowd, and I turned to face Isaac once again. "I really do hate you sometimes, you know that?" Isaac shrugged his shoulders. Unfortunately, the boy was confused, and I only helped him. "Well, forcing him to do something is not dash." His lips suddenly covered my mouth, shutting me up. His arms latched around my waist, pulling me closer to him. Once he pulled away, he rested his forehead against mine and sighed. "The boy, Ryan, how did he get like that?" I asked him, and Isaac sighed. "The boy is half vampire. The vampire race saw him as a mutant when he was born to his werewolf mother. They tried to kill him as a baby, but fortunately, my father intervened and took the child from them, not before damage had been done. His parents took him in when his mother passed away." I leaned into his chest. "That's so terrible. Does he know?" "Of course he knows. It's hard to keep the craving for blood a secret. Though I do expect him to be much more of a vampire than he is a werewolf when he's older. He seemed to have inherited a lot from his father." Isaac sighed and shook his head before wrapping an arm around my waist and leading me back down the corridor. "Perhaps I'll introduce you to some of the other interesting pack members." He smiled down at me before leading me through the crowd of people. Chapter 19. As Isaac pushed through the crowd, he held a tight grip on my hand, making sure he didn't lose me for a second. He glanced back at me a few times before we came to a halt at an open door where young children were coming in and out. "Alana," Isaac called into the room as he spotted the young woman who was kneeling behind a young girl and tying up her dress. Alana's head snapped towards us and she smiled sweetly. I cringed when I saw her sway her hips as she made her way towards us. "Alana, this is my mate. Lauren, this is Alana. She takes care of the human children in the pack." I frowned and looked up at him. "Human children?" Before he could speak, Alana butted in. "I take care of the children who won't change into wolves." "How do you know they won't?" I asked her, and she leaned onto her left leg and sighed. "They have at least 3 generations of humans in them, therefore making them unable to shift. It's very common, Lauren. You find them in every pack." I glared at him. He made me sound stupid. "Right, because I didn't know that," I told him sarcastically and crossed my arms over my chest. "Alana, if you excuse us. I need to speak to my mate." She bowed her head and returned to helping the children. Isaac turned to me and gave me a harsh look. "What is wrong with you?" he asked, and I glared at him again. You're making me sound like an idiot in front of Alana. Lauren, he sighed. I didn't mean to make you sound like an idiot, Dash. But you are. I know that some children can't change. I'm not completely oblivious to the werewolf world. What did you think I did at home all the time? Lauren, I'm not trying to do anything. I'm sorry if I did. I really am. Can we talk about this later? I nodded slowly before he led me out of the room. They're really great kids, he told me. Probably the best behaved kids in the pack. When we have our first child, I want him or her. He gave me a pointed look when he said the last two words, to be friends with one of those kids. You want our child to be friends with a human? I asked him, and he nodded. Don't you? I would have thought that you would have Dash. No. I mean, I didn't expect you to say that. I would have thought that you Dash. He chuckled and wrapped his arm around my shoulders. You expect me to say a lot of different things. Instead of expecting things from me, maybe you can just trust me instead. He smiled at me and leaned down to kiss my forehead. Now, I do believe you have a dinner date. Amusement glistened in his eyes as he led me back towards the main part of the house. So Ryan, I started, putting a tomato into my mouth. What grade are you in? I asked as he pushed his food around his plate. I don't go to school. I frowned and ate some more food before swallowing. Why not? Does your mother not let you? If so, I will Dash. I dropped out last year, he told me, staring down at his plate. Oh, there was a silence between us. May I ask you why? He finally looked up at me and shrugged. I didn't really get along with the other pack members. How do you mean didn't get along? He looked down again and pushed the salad around his plate some more. I don't really want to talk about it, Luna. It's not important, Dash. Ryan. If the other pack members were abusing you, it is entirely important. I will not let anyone get bullied in my pack. It's fine, Luna. It's just some kids, Dash. Who? I asked, and he shook his head. Please, Luna. It's not I'm Dash. Who dares lay a finger on you? I demanded, and he cowered back in his chair. It was a group of boys whose wolves are strong for their age. I stood up immediately, pushing my chair back in the process. Right. As I began to head towards the door, I looked back at Ryan. He was still cowering in his chair, and I sighed before heading back to him and grabbing his wrist. Are they still bullying you? He looked at me and nodded slowly. Ryan, bullying is something I will not tolerate. Even if you were the pack runt, I would not stand for it. As I pulled the double doors open, Isaac was standing there talking to Kent in hushed voices. You! I shouted to him, and he turned his head around. Come with me. He raised his eyebrows in shock at my sudden aggressiveness. Once he began to walk towards me, I spoke again. I would like to show you how your pack members treat people who are different in a horrible way. Lauren, I'm sure you are mistaken. My pack would Dash. Quiet, Isaac, I blurted out and instantly regretted it when I saw the look in his eyes. Okay, he muttered, completely confused by the change in personality. As we walked towards the training grounds, I turned towards Ryan. Which ones? He nodded towards the pack of guys who were in a very aggressive fight with each other. Stay here, I growled to the two of them before heading towards the pack of guys. As soon as I cleared my throat, the fight stopped. I watched as the largest one stepped forward and grinned down at me. Hello there, sweetie. Are you looking for a little attention from the boys? He asked as the rest of the group chuckled. Sure, I said as he started to lean down towards me. As soon as he was close enough for me to reach, I slapped him. He suddenly pulled back in shock and wrapped a hand over his cheek. What the heck? He muttered before looking at me. Now, guys, I do believe you have me confused with someone else. I'm your Luna. They all started to glance around before all of their eyes lay on the Alpha, who I could already tell was glaring at them all and probably heading this way. To bring your attention back here, boys, I said as their eyes snapped back to me. I'd like to bring up the subject of bullying. As I stepped closer towards them, my eyes hardened in a glare. Touch any of my pack again, and you will regret it. Got it. The boys nodded their heads quickly before I glared at them all again, before turning away. You're all suspended from shifting until further notice. I heard Isaac growl at them before wrapping an arm around my waist. You, my beautiful mate, are one of the most brilliant people I have ever seen. He told me before kissing my left temple. Chapter 20. So, Lauren, Naomi started, sitting next to me and wiggling her eyebrows. Carly was grinning wildly at me and kept standing in front of me. Have you and Isaac, you know? My head whipped around to her and my eyebrows shot right up. What? You know what I'm talking about, Lauren, she said, nudging my shoulder like we were back in high school sharing secrets. Have you and Isaac, you know? I have no idea what you're talking about, I told her, keeping a confused face. Carly huffed and crossed her arms, becoming very impatient. Have you and Isaac completed the mating bond? There, Naomi, was that what you were trying to say? Carly finally blurted it out before turning to me when Naomi nodded, embarrassed, and I still hadn't said anything. Why does it matter? I asked, standing up, and Carly rolled her eyes. Because it's something all normal she-wolves like to talk about. I think we've kind of established that I'm not exactly normal, I told her, and she shrugged her shoulders. Are you going to answer us or not? I traced the outline of the old fireplace we were sitting around in one of the empty living rooms. No, we haven't. The two girls gasped in shock, and Naomi turned me around at full force. What do you mean you haven't? She said, beginning to shake me a little. We just haven't. We've both been really busy and dash. That's no excuse. Everyone in the entire pack knows that Isaac wants kids, and as soon as possible. He used to sit in his office and dream about it for half of the freaking day. Hang on. What? I said, pulling her arms away from me. I'm kind of confused. I'm pretty sure that I won't get pregnant the first time. Especially if we take precautions, dash. Oh, honey, Naomi said, shaking her head and wrapping an arm around my shoulder. Nothing will stop nature from taking its course. It's a common fact that a Luna always gets pregnant on the first try. It's a survival instinct an alpha has. I swallowed the lump that was slowly forming in my throat. I don't even know if I want kids. I'm too young, I squeaked out. Carly shrugged and threw herself onto the couch. Well, I'm sorry, but get ready for some babies, because I'm sure Isaac will be pestering you soon. He's full of male instincts. But I dash. I heard my name, Isaac said, entering the room with a grin on his face. I hope you were talking about nice things regarding me. Yeah, sure, if you call dash. Naomi covered Carly's mouth with her hand and smiled at Isaac. Sorry, Alpha. Girl stuff, you can't question it. Isaac's eyes slowly drifted from the two girls to me, and his smile turned into a frown when he saw my face. Hey, what is wrong? He asked, coming towards me. I shook my head when he wrapped an arm around my shoulder. It's nothing, Isaac. Just thinking. Well, okay, he said, not questioning it anymore. Do you want to get some dinner with me before we go to bed? I nodded and glanced over my shoulder to see Carly rocking her arms back and forth, like she was holding a baby and making a really silly face. I shot her a quick glare before leaving with Isaac. I finally kicked off my shoes when I fell onto the couch in our bedroom. Isaac was walking into the wardrobe, taking off his tie on the way, and it got me thinking. My thoughts drifted towards the conversation the girls and I had earlier. My eyes drifted up to Isaac, who was coming out of the wardrobe while tying the knot on his pajama pants. Lauren, I dash. He looked up at me and cut himself off when he realized how he had interrupted my line of thought. You've been really distracted today, Lauren. What's wrong? My eyes drifted down towards the plush carpet, and I sighed. So, you want kids? I asked him, finally looking up at him to see his reaction. He shrugged lightly before taking a seat next to me. Every alpha wants kids, Lauren. It's a natural instinct. He studied me for a second before continuing. If I didn't, I knew I wouldn't be a good alpha. Nor would I have ever been the alpha. How many? I asked in sudden interest. He relaxed his head back and stared up at the ceiling. 4. 3 boys and a girl would be perfect. Wouldn't the girl get a little swamped with the amount of boys in the house? I asked him, and he looked back at me. No. She would have you. Even if she hated you, she wouldn't be able to for very long. He grinned playfully at me before standing up and heading towards the bathroom. I'm sorry, Isaac, I called to him. He stopped in his tracks before turning around. What for? Dropping my head, I started to bite my lip. For not being the perfect mate. I mean, you need someone who would be able to have kids straight away. Now I understand how much you want them, it's dash. I cut myself off quickly before sobs escaped from my mouth. Lauren, look at me. I didn't lift my head until he put a thumb under my chin and lifted it himself. I don't want you ever thinking that you're not the perfect mate, because you are. We're improving each other every day. I'm making you into a person who doesn't have to fear the world, and you're making me into a big soft man. A smile broke out onto my lips, and he kissed them lightly. And as for kids, I can wait forever. We don't have to have them now, and if you don't want them ever, that's okay. We have Delos who can take over. That's why Dash. I want to complete the bond. I interrupted his speech, and he pulled back a bit. Lauren, you don't know what you're asking. As soon as you give me permission, my wolf will want to take control, and I've been trying to keep him in check for so long that I dash. I don't care, Isaac. It's not fair to keep you waiting any longer. I could see his wolf bubbling to the surface slowly as Isaac tried to hold him back while cradling me in his arms. Just be gentle, okay? I whispered. He nodded softly before laying me on the bed. Chapter 21. Lauren's POV. The sunlight pressing against my eyes was what woke me up. I breathed heavily before shifting on the hard pillow next to me. The really hard, warm pillow which was breathing. I jerked my head up sharply before studying the chest, which was rising and falling perfectly. Glancing up at the face of the man the chest belonged to, I smiled slightly before tracing his strong jawline. His nose twitched, and I tried to keep the laugh in my throat. As I moved my lips to his neck, he grunted before flipping me over onto my back. I thought I was going to have a quiet and shy mate, not one that misbehaved. He nuzzled his head and kissed his mark playfully. But I think I like this one more. I giggled and leaned up to kiss him just as there was a knock on the door. Isaac growled in annoyance and whipped his head around towards the door. Who is it? It's Kent. Isaac growled again before pulling away from me and swinging his legs over the side of the bed before pulling on his pants. Stay here, he commanded me, and I glared at him. Hey Dash. I didn't get to say anything else because he had slammed the door and gone straight into one of his moods. Geesh, he is not a morning person. Yawning loudly, I decided to head for a shower before getting changed and heading downstairs for breakfast. Kent was standing there, wiping the blood from under his nose while sitting at the bottom of the stairs. Hey, I said, stopping in front of him. What happened? I watched him as he shrugged his shoulders and slumped forward. Alpha got mad for interrupting you earlier. I am truly sorry, I did no dash. Perhaps we shouldn't talk about that, I said, glancing around for prying eyes before moving mine back to him. Especially in public. He sniffed and nodded as he got to his feet. I must go check on Naomi and Delos. He bowed before walking away, and I set my eyes on Isaac's study, knowing he was in there. That jerk face doesn't know what he's in for after treating his pack members in such a disrespectful way. I could already hear him muttering to himself as I walked through his study looking for something. Not caring to knock, I waltzed into the room, and his eyes snapped up to me. Don't you knock? He hissed at me, and I stood proud and tall, trying not to flinch at his words. I wouldn't think I had to knock. I am your mate. And that gets you privileges, how? Walking towards him, I took a seat on the side of his desk. Maybe our mating doesn't mean anything to you, but I know it means something to your wolf, and I can hold off for as long as I like. Shrugging at the end, I began to turn away. I saw his jaw twitch. You can't deny me, he growled out, and I looked him straight in the eye. No, but I sure as heck can dominate your wolf. His left eye twitched as he sat down in his chair. As you can tell, I'm not a morning person, he muttered before looking up at me. I'm sorry, he apologized. And you punch your beta? I asked him, and he nodded, embarrassed at the fact that he had hurt him. Well, perhaps you need to know how to play nice with friends. First, tell me why he woke us up at such an early hour. His head leaned back on the black chair as I shuffled, so I was in front of him on the desk. There was a mass rogue sighting in the western part of our territory. Why not send out more warriors? I asked him, and he shook his head. A vampire was spotted with them. Although I had never met a vampire, I already knew they were bad news. A battle between werewolves, vampires, and humans had led to the separation of our own species. It was a long story that was very patchy at parts, but the vampires believed they should be able to turn into an animal as well, but the shifters at the time had not allowed it, and so we split off from each other. Anyway, back to the subject at hand. What are we going to do? I asked him, and he sighed. I'll have to bring my warriors in. I will not risk their lives just so they can run the border. They should be here when they attack. Attack? Vampires are always sighted before they attack a pack. I wouldn't have been surprised that they were trying to attack us, but with them getting help from rogues, I see it very unlikely that half the pack will even survive Dash. I instantly slapped him across the face. How dare you think like that? Don't you ever say that again, I growled at him, and he nodded slowly before shaking his head and reaching past me to grab a piece of paper. Surviving a vampire attack is very rare for an alpha, but I don't care. I will fight for my pack. We have to prepare now. He pushed himself from the chair as I began to take in his words. This time you seriously have to stay here, he said, leaning forward and kissing my forehead. Please. I nodded at his words as he left, and I shifted myself into his black chair. Rare? Isaac's POV. You 5, gather up your group of warriors and protect the West Wing. We must make sure they are well protected and make sure all the maids and cooks are in there as well. Being anywhere else in the house is not something that can be questioned. Make sure it's everyone. The 5 nodded their heads before they began to lock down the West Wing, and I hoped it was tight security for them. You 4, I want you to go through the gardens and tell any of the humans or werewolves out there to get inside and into the West Wing. They nodded as they set off towards the garden. I looked at the last 3. And you 3. I want you to bring all scouts in. They bowed before leaving me alone with Kent. Kent shifted from one leg to the other as he was trying to get in on the action. Calm, I told him, placing a hand on his shoulder. You'll be able to do something soon. First, you have to help me get everyone out of the hospital wing. They are most important right now. He nodded, following me towards the hospital wing. I could already see doctors trying to help those who couldn't walk towards the West Wing. I stopped a nurse who was packing up a first aid kit. Where are the rest? I asked her, and she nodded down the hall. It's been hard to get them to move. It's the children I'm more worried about. We haven't been able to get to them yet. Children are always F-. Yes, Alpha, but everyone started rushing towards the West Wing, and the children had to be kept in their room. I'm sorry, L-. Forget the first aid kit. Help me carry the children. She nodded and led us the way towards the small children's ward I had arranged in the last few years. The ones which were left were orphans whose parents had died in some way or another. As soon as they saw me, they all quieted down, and I lifted a young girl from her bed and placed her on my shoulder. Who can't walk? No one raised their hand as Kent began to pick up 2 of the babies who were deathly ill by the looks on their faces. Okay. Now everyone pair up with a partner and choose Kent or me to follow, I said as they quickly shifted into pairs. I nodded and started to lead them towards the West Wing. I glanced behind me every second of the way to make sure they were all there. I quickly counted every time to make sure everyone was there. Thankfully, they were. When we were in the West Wing, I quickly found someone to take care of them, and I heard a howl from the nearby forest. Both of our heads snapped up as people shifted around us, more urgent to get into the wing. They're closer than I thought, I muttered, and I glanced towards my office, finally deciding to move my mate to a safe place. Kent followed my gaze and raised an eyebrow. You're fully mated now? I nodded my head, and he clapped me on the back. May I be able to bring my mate to safety as well? Yes, you may, I told him, and he nodded his head as he hurried up the stairs to his mate. While I was on the outside, I was praying that no harm would come to me. Lauren's POV. What seemed like hours later, the 2 doors burst open to see a worried-looking Isaac. What is it? I instantly asked as he marched towards me and pulled me into a hug. Hey, what's wrong? He said, leading me over towards the bookcase. They're much closer than we originally thought. So you're going to read books? I asked him, confused, and he looked at me and sighed. This house has more secrets than you should know. Here. He grabbed the side of the large bookcase and pulled it sideways out of the way so that a small door appeared. He put his hand on the small of my back. Where are we going? I stuttered, and he looked at me before leading me into a small room with no doors or windows, or anything but a mattress and a few blankets, which I guessed were to keep me warm. Lauren, when it's finished, Kent or I will come for you. If you hear anyone else, I want you to take this gun, he said, finally handing me a gun. And shoot them. Right here. He said, putting it into my hands and then resting the barrel against his heart. It will be an instant death shot. Except if it's a vampire, then you have to change. But I dash. He shook his head. Just trust your wolf when she says that it's time to change. Oh, okay, I muttered, and he kissed me one last time before leaving me in the dark. Chapter 22. Lauren's POV. It felt like months, no, years had gone by since the last time I had spoken to Isaac. The distance between my mate and me was painful, knowing that he was risking his life for his pack, our pack. The sound of howls and screams of something that wasn't human alerted me that they were inside the house. I rose to my feet with the gun in hand and walked over to the small concrete hallway. The hallway was a dead end to the right, but a small line of light was leaking through from under the door. You are the world's bravest Luna. My wolf entered my thoughts from inside the cage I had kept her in. Do you want to get killed? I asked her back, earning no reply until a few minutes later. No, but remember when I said I would let you know when a good time to let me free is? Well, this is a good time. She retaliated, and I scoffed mentally. Right, so I'm going to listen to my wolf instead of my very intelligent mate. I'm part of you. You'd rather listen to your mate than your own conscience. Well, was my mate the one who killed 3 humans? No, I didn't think so. There was no reply from my wolf until she sighed. That wasn't my fault. I was excited. So that's what you call it, huh? Once again, there was no reply, and I was actually glad. At least I was hoping she wasn't going to reply. Then, as if someone had stabbed me in the stomach, a piercing pain hit me. I doubled over in pain and bit down on my lip to try not to scream out before I backed towards the mattress and sank into it. My heart suddenly felt like it was being torn in two, and my wolf cried out with me. Something was wrong, and I didn't know what it was, and neither did my wolf. I was losing something, and I didn't know what. Like a part of my soul was being ripped away from me, and then it suddenly stopped, like it was never there. I collapsed back onto the couch, breathing heavily, and I clenched my eyes shut. My mind wandered to Isaac, and I was silently hoping he was okay. The shouting outside stopped as if they knew something was wrong as well, and I crawled over to the hallway with the gun clasped in my left hand. The sound of the bookcase being scraped along the floor alerted me that someone was there. The light in the hallway began to get bigger, and the door was thrown open. The light from outside burned my eyes, forcing me to hold my hand up to cover them. Who is it? I asked towards the figure which had stepped in front of the light. The gun was taken from my hands and laid onto the floor as the man crouched down next to me. Lauren, are you okay? I let out a sigh of relief at Kent's voice, knowing that it wasn't a rogue or vampire. I'm fine. I'm fine. Can you help me up? I watched his head nod as he helped me to my feet, and I dusted the small cement flecks off my shirt. Why are you here? I asked him, and he frowned. Didn't Isaac tell you that I was going to get you? Yes, but I mean, why are you here and not Isaac? There was a silence, and he suddenly placed his hand in the middle of my back. Come on, you have to help me with the pack to try and calm them down. He was avoiding the question I asked. Okay, I will, but you avoided my question, I argued, and he was silent again. We need to talk about it later, Lauren. Here is not the place for it, he whispered to me as pack members walked through the foyer and towards the West Wing. I stopped and looked up at Kent. Why not? What's wrong with talking about it now? The problem is with people overhearing us. I glanced around at the members moving towards the West Wing, and I looked up at Kent. If it's about Isaac, you have to tell me. Lauren, I can't dash. I glared at him. I demand that you tell me what happened to Isaac. I watched him as if he was fighting a battle inside before dragging me over towards a small corner. Lauren, I tried to help him. I really did dash. Wait. Start from the beginning. I don't want you to beat around the bush. He sighed and ran his hand through his short hair. Okay. Well, one of the younger of the pack warriors was in a bit of trouble when he was trying to take down a rogue, so Isaac took down the rogue for him, or tried to, so that the young boy could get away. Unfortunately, in a matter of seconds, he was surrounded by rogues and 2 vampires. I don't know what the vampires were saying, but they said something to him, and then they all attacked him at once. I wanted to help him, but he told me, along with the rest of the pack, to return to the pack house. He didn't come back in. He trailed off, not wanting to say the words that I dreaded to hear. Then, as if someone flicked on a light, it all clicked into place. The pain, my wolf talking to me again, and Kent coming to get me. My mate was gone. Tears started to fill my eyes as I shook my head at Kent. "You're lying," I told him, jabbing a finger at his chest. "Why are you lying to me?" "Why?" "Lauren, I'm not lying to you. I wouldn't lie about something like this. Isaac is gone, Lauren. I'm sorry, and dash. No, he's not gone. I would have known, and dash." I finally broke down, leaning against the wall for support, but slowly sliding down it to sit on the floor. "Lauren, stop. You have to snap out of it. Your pack needs you." I didn't respond as I continued to sob into my hands. "Your pack needs you, Lauren. They just lost their alpha dash. And I lost my mate. Do you really expect me to go out there and tell them that my mate is gone? You're a selfish man, Kent. You can't bring him back, dash." A howl erupted from the forest, and something clicked. My mate's killers are out there, and they need to pay for the pain they put him through. For once in a long time, I could feel my wolf begging no, demanding she be let free, and I let her. "Lauren, stop." I could hear Kent say from in the distance. I could feel the bone in my back start to crack and reshape into another form as a growl left my throat. I stared at my hands as they started to grow white fur and retake the form of paws. I bit down a scream as I leaned forward so that my back legs could take the form of a wolf. Then, as quickly as it came, it stopped. The sound of panting came out of my mouth and my tongue rolled over my sharp teeth. My eyes traveled up to Kent, where he had pushed himself up against the wall. "Lauren," he called out. "You need to change back before the rest of the pack sees you, dash." My wolf let out a growl at him and took a small step towards him. I could see him suck in a breath, and fear traveled through his eyes and washed over his face before I caught the glint of the window in my right eye. Glancing over at it, I saw the reflection of a wolf. The eyes blazed red like blood, and a black stripe followed from the top of my nose, over my back and to the tip of my tail, which faded into a gray until it was white down at my feet. Almost like I had been contaminated by darkness, as it tried to take over me. A howl of victory sounded outside, and my wolf instantly snapped to attention, tearing my sight from the reflection. They were still here, and my wolf knew it. I could feel the claws extend in my paws and the hair on my back start to stand up on end before she took off towards the forest. Looking through my wolf's head was like looking into a nightmare. She was insane. The images and thoughts going through her mind made me want to make her stop and forget everything, but then Isaac entered my mind, and I silently wept. The first vampire came into view, and one thought was going through her mind. Kill him. She was out to kill every single one of them. She was bloodthirsty. Epilogue. Lauren stared down at the small picture of her mate. It was taken just before the attack when he was announcing her as his mate. Lauren traced the outline of the small pocket-sized picture before the sound of a cough made her snap her head up towards the door. A 19-year-old stood there. He studied the broken woman in front of him before taking a seat next to her at the table. There was a silence before the young boy placed his hand on top of hers. I know it must hurt because of the date today. 19 years since her mate had gone missing. Lauren refused to believe he was dead. But please, mother. This is a hard time for me as well. Why? She asked in a soft voice. Because you're seeing everyone else get their mates? Lauren stared her son directly in the eyes. Having a mate takes patience and love. She will come to you when the time is right. She saw anger flash through his eyes, and they dropped to a glare. I'm not ready for my mate? I know that your mate was harsh and cruel to you, but I am not my father. Lauren let out a small laugh. You are like him in more ways than one. It was true that he did look identical to his father, but he had heard of the ways he treated his mother, and he hated him for it. There was no excuse for it, and he banged his fist against the table, making Lauren jump a little before settling back into her seat. "How dare you speak to me like that?" He roared at his mother. "I am your alpha dash. And I am your mother. No matter how you put it, you can never overrule your mother." Lauren turned back to stare at the photo. "I suggest you leave, Isaac." Her son gave her one last hard glare before leaving, slamming the doors behind him. The mother-son relationship between them had started to fade fast once he had learned about the horrible things his father had done to her, and yet she still loved him. Lauren sighed at the thought of her son hating his own father. He had never even known him, and yet he judged him so harshly. Her ears picked up the sound of paper being slid across the floor. Her head snapped up again to see a small piece of paper on the floor. Lauren slowly made her way over towards it and picked it up. It was folded in half, and Lauren opened the door slightly to look outside. Seeing that no one was there, she closed the door again and took her seat at the head of the table. Her legs curled up beneath her, and she smoothed her hair behind her left ear before opening up the small piece of paper. "On the next full moon, your mate will be executed by the rogue who captured you. Be prepared to fight." Lauren was jolted back by the words, and she suddenly looked over the calendar in her head. A month and a half till the lunar eclipse. Lauren's wolf immediately howled inside. It was the first time she had spoken in 19 years, and she kept repeating the same words. "He's alive."